Please silence your cell phones. We all saw what happened yesterday. So if it goes off, Commissioner to my right will have words with you afterward. It'll be fine though. Let's do a roll call this morning. Commissioner Bell,
Here.
Commissioner Haskell,
Present.
Commissioner Jolovich,
Here.
Commissioner Mai. Commissioner Mai, can you hear us?
Madam President, I can't hear you.
Okay. All right, we have a verbal confirmation, or at least solid wave. Commissioner Masterson.
Here.
Commissioner Roberts.
Present.
And I am President Lundvall and am here. So members of the public who wish to address the commission on any agenda item, please fill out a comment form located at the registration table. Hand it to one of the department staff who will forward it to me. Assisting with the meeting today is Tara Hodges, Cody Region. She's there in the back waving at all of you now. If you are participating via Zoom, you should have submitted an advance comment form prior to the start of the meeting. But if you'd still like to comment on an agenda item, please contact the host of the meeting. As we work through the agenda, the public will have the opportunity to address the commission. To ensure everyone has the opportunity to speak and as a courtesy to others, please limit your time. Commissioners, make sure your mic is on when you speak so that you can be heard. Remember, red means a hot mic. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Let's move right on to our agenda. Dr. Hall. There we go.
There we go. Thanks. Well, good morning, President Lundvall, Director Bruce, members of the commission. I am excited to be able to share a few updates on our ongoing mule deer monitoring program with you today. I'm Ember Hall, and I have to supervise the Department Science Research and Analytical Support Unit. And it looks like Wayne's pulling my slides up. Thanks, Wayne. Okay, great. Well, with that, before we get started, I do want to acknowledge Lucas Olson. He's a co-author on this talk and put a lot of work into the material that I'll be presenting to you today. Maybe. I don't, is it the button on the right to advance? Yeah, but you got to turn it off. Oh, it's fancy. Oh, there we go. Okay, thank you. Okay, so as some of you may remember, in April of 2022, you approved a top-to-bottom overhaul, review, and enhancement of how we monitor mule deer in the state. Now, this program consists of 6 areas that are really central to management. In the interest of time today, I'm just going to talk about 4 of those. And those 4 are shown here in these yellow boxes. So some of our disease and herd health work, information on herd size, access to data that's reliable and accurate and available to our managers in real time or near real time, as well as meaningful assessments of survival, movement, and habitat use. All right, so a cornerstone of management is understanding how many animals we have in a population. And this makes sense, right? If you want to know if your population is trending upward or trending downward, or if you want to understand the effects that your management decisions are having, you kind of need to know how many animals are in your population. However, this can be kind of a tricky number to get. And the reason for that is for a lot of species, mule deer included, it can be really hard to see every deer. Now, we like to think that we can, but I think any of us who have been out hunting, looking for a buck or just meat to fill the freezer, we know that it can be kind of hard to find these guys. And so the way that we account for this is by using an industry standard survey. It's called a siteability survey. And it just accounts for the fact that as much as we want to, we can't see every animal while we're out there. The really good thing about these surveys is that they give us very defensible numbers. The bad thing about these surveys is that they are pricey. So prior to this program, we were able to afford about one survey per herd per year. Quick math, we have over 30 mule deer herds in the state. So it would have taken at that pace 30 years to be able to get an estimate for all of our herds, more than 30 years to be able to do that. With the funding that you provided, we've been able to do 19 of these surveys in the last 3 years. This is a really big deal and a huge step forward in our management program. So the number of animals that you find in a population it's largely influenced by how well those critters survive, right? You can't have a lot of animals in a population if they aren't living to survive and reproduce. So the second big focus of this work that I'm going to talk with you about today is our survival work. And this is kind of the centerpiece of the mule deer monitoring program. So in order to assess survival, we use the gold standard, which is GPS collars. And I'm guessing most of you are familiar with GPS collars, but for those that maybe are not, just quickly, there's a GPS device that's assembled in the collar. It's the same thing, or pretty much the same thing as many of us have on our phones that track locations. GPS device fitted on the collar. It's all attached to a neckband that has a battery that runs that whole system. These collars provide us with a tremendous amount of data, and they've really been sort of a renaissance in terms of understanding all sorts of populations, not just mule deer, but they help us learn about survival. And then in addition to that, they can also teach us a whole lot about movement, habitat use, the effectiveness of habitat treatments that we're putting on the ground, and more. So in November of 22, we started what we call the focal herd program. And these herds are shown here on your screen. There are 5 herds. And we picked these herds specifically because it's just so cool. We pick these herds because they give us a really wonderful sense of the different geographies, landscapes, predator communities, disease profiles that our mule deer herds persist in across the state. So we're able to capitalize on sort of a natural experiment, right? To be able to understand survival dynamics, movement patterns, habitat use across this whole different ecological framework. So in each of these 5 herds, we maintain a sample size of 80 does, 30 bucks, and 100 juveniles. Now, I'll make a note here on juveniles. These are 6-month-olds. These are not neonate fawns. These are animals that have reached at least 6 months of age. We've done 3 captures. We just wrapped up our last capture at the end of January this year, and I'm pleased to report that things are going quite well. As we get data that comes in from these collars, and especially now that we're a couple years in, we can start to see patterns and understand a little bit more about what's going on with our populations. So a key part of this work, obviously, is understanding survival, and I just want to give you an update on where we're at for 2024. So I'm going to walk you through this figure. You're going to see 3 in a row that are very similar, so I'll just orient you to the figure. Here on this x-axis, or the horizontal axis, you have month of year. We're going to look at survival from January 1 of 2024 through December 31 of 2024. On the y-axis, we have survival. That's hopefully self-explanatory, but this is basically the percentage of animals that are continuing to persist in the population across time. And then you've got a little inset map there to orient you to where we're at in space. Okay, so this is what the data for 2024 look like. A couple of things I'll draw your attention to. So the colors that you see on the map, that matches the lines that you see. So hopefully that can give you some quick reference there. A couple of things to note. So first of all, survival was pretty clumped this year across our 5 herds. It basically was falling in within the range of what we would expect for a long-term average for doe survival. Between 0.75 and 0.85 for a long-term average is about where we would anticipate herds to be. So we're generally seeing that pattern here. One notable difference, though, is that the survival for does in Upper Shoshone was statistically different, statistically lower than the survival that we saw in the Wyoming range. So next we'll look at bucks. Now for buck survival, this figure looks a little bit different. You might remember that we only collar 30 bucks in each of our herds. So when you see these sort of larger drops on this figure, a lot of that is just related to the fact it's a smaller number. You're sort of taking one out of a smaller number. So the decreases look a little bit more pronounced here. Again, very similar pattern to what I showed you with does. So our highest survival is in the Wyoming range. Our lowest survival is in Upper Shoshone. I'll let you in on a little secret. Statistically, these numbers aren't super different. They look like they're really different, but they're actually not as different as they might seem by looking at the figure. Then our last cohort, this is our juvenile cohort, again, 6 months, about that 6 months age. A couple of things to pay attention to here. There's a long-term study in Idaho that suggests about 55% survival is what you would see in kind of an average year across time in juveniles. We were above that this year in every single one of our 5 herds, which is great. We do expect survival to be variable in this cohort, and that's why we collar so many more of them, is because we're trying to understand that variability and quantify that variability. Now, an astute observer will notice that I changed the x-axis on you. This one only goes from January 1 to May 31. That's just because that's the time frame over which we monitor this cohort. After they reach June, we treat them as having been recruited into that new adult population. Okay, so a question that we often get is how does this winter, and by this winter, I mean the winter of 2024 to 2025, how does that compare to what we've been seeing? So this figure, we're trying to answer that question with this figure. So here again on that horizontal axis, you have week of year from January 1 to May 21, and then the number of mortalities that we're seeing, and that goes from 0 to 22. Data from 2025 is shown in dark green, and 2024 is that kind of sandy color. So I would say initially looking at this based on where we stand right now, this winter has been comparable to maybe a little bit worse than what we saw last winter. But really, if you're a mule deer, the weeks that make the biggest difference for you are about to come. These spring snowstorms, and any of you who tried to get here on Tuesday or Wednesday will know spring snowstorms are a big deal. Spring snowstorms are what really can sort of exacerbate those winter conditions for our mule deer. And it makes sense, right? Like by the time they get to February and March, they are running on empty. They're really energetically depleted. And then you throw a bunch of heavy wet snow on top of that, and we can start to see some big survival impacts. So the story is yet to come, but this is where we're at relative to 2024. I do want to show you because we all, I think, remember the winter of 2022, 2023, just to give you a sense and maybe ease your mind a little bit. This is what we look like relative to 2023. And the first thing I want to show you is that vertical axis. The scale on that changed, right? We went to 22 mortalities on the last one. This one goes up to 48. And you can see a very, very different pattern here, including the fact that we really didn't attenuate with those mortalities until about April of 2023. So a much better picture, as you might expect, than where we were relative to a couple years ago. So one of the things that can predict how well we deer survive, the survival numbers that we see, is juvenile mass. We know from quite a lot of literature and work that heavier animals just survive better, and that makes sense, right? You got a little one that you're putting into the field in front of winter. It has to navigate a new landscape. It has to find food resources. The bigger animals just do better in this juvenile cohort. So in the second year of the project, we started collecting data on mass from a random selection of juveniles. So again, this is just juvenile data. I wanted to show you a couple comparisons of what that looks like. So you have the Laramie Mountains and the Wyoming Range shown here. Some interesting patterns. Juvenile survival in the Laramie Mountains in 2023, November of 2023, was comparable to what we've seen in both years in the Wyoming Range. Unfortunately, that didn't hold this past November of 2024. We did see a drop in their size. Managers think that that's probably related to precipitation and just some resources that were on the ground in 2023. Same comparison here for North Bighorn and Upper Shoshone. This is interesting. We're only 2 years into this part of the project, but North Bighorn fawns in both years have been statistically smaller than our Upper Shoshone fawns. There's a meaningful body size difference between those two herds. So it's not just being big that determines whether you live or die. There's a whole lot of things out there on the landscape if you're a mule deer that is very interested in taking you out, so to speak. So in order to kind of get our heads around what survival patterns look like and what mortality patterns correspondingly look like, we've enrolled 2 herds in what we call a cause of mortality study. This work is really intensive. It requires a ton of person hours to complete, and I'm really grateful that we have the opportunity to do it. So the way this works is basically when we receive a notification of mortality for animals in either of these 2 herds, we drop everything and go out and try to investigate essentially the carcass and see what we can learn and see if we can understand what killed it. A couple of caveats with these data. In some cases, it works great and we get whole carcasses like you can see on the left-hand side of your screen. We can collect a whole bunch of tissues like you see in the middle of your screen, and we can really start to understand a lot about what was going on with that individual. Those are the best cases. Unfortunately, we do have situations where we get to a site and it's just a collar and we don't have much for evidence. So we can't attribute cause of mortality in every case. In fact, it's about 50% of the time on the data we've collected so far where we can establish that. That's the first piece I wanted to tell you about. The second piece I wanted to tell you about is, and I think this makes sense, but it's a little weird to say out loud, the thing that caused an animal's heart to stop beating may not be the thing that in the long run was going to actually kill it. This is what we call comorbidities, but basically, just to give you an example, if an animal got hit by a car, it was a car that caused that animal's heart to stop beating, but it's also possible that it was on a poor nutritional plane or it had chronic wasting disease and wasn't able to navigate its environment quite as well. So we're really trying to dig in and understand these comorbidities. One of the easiest comorbidities for us to track is the nutritional condition that an animal was at when it died. And what I'm showing you here are pictures of bone marrow. Bone marrow, turns out, is a wonderful index of nutritional condition. So I think most folks know this. Bone marrow is sort of a fatty substance that resides within the cavity of the bone. We all have it. I don't recommend you do it, but you could bust open your own femur and you could look and there's some bone marrow for you. Healthy bone marrow, hopefully all of our bone marrow, looks like what you see there on the right-hand side of your screen. It fills the cavity, it's white in color, it has a lot of fat. It's great. What you see on the left is bone marrow from an animal that was in very poor condition. And what you'll notice, of course, is the change in color, a very watery consistency, and it's starting to retract from that cavity space. The reason this happens is because the body is catabolizing the fat that remains within that marrow. If you think about catabolizing fat within marrow, you are in a very bad space. So we try to track this in order to help us understand what's going on with the mortality patterns that we see. There we go. Okay, so these are data that we collected from the Laramie Mountains herd. You're seeing data from 71 mortalities where we were able to assign either a definitive cause of mortality or we had a really strong suspicion of what was going on. So you've got causes on the left, number of cases on the bottom, and then we've broken these data out by those marrow conditions. So animals that show up in green, those were healthy animals. Those were animals where, for example, we're pretty sure a mountain lion killed that animal and it was healthy. The sand-colored, unhealthy marrow indexes marrow that was in that condition, that red condition I showed you earlier. So what I want you to take away from this slide is really that mortality is not equally distributed across these sort of nutritional conditions, right? If you're sick, you're probably going to die. You may die from emaciation, you may die from a lion, you may die from a coyote, but these data have some complexities that we need to think about. One note here, we did have some of our collared animals harvested. Those were all adult males. We don't have any female harvest in this herd. Yes? Okay, there we go. Just a couple more things I want to bring to your attention as part of this update. So As you can imagine, if you're a mule deer that's navigating lots of things that want to kill you, some bad winter conditions, some other tricky things on the landscape, you might want to move, right? And we all know this. We know that movement is super important. So this is some data that we've been able to put together based on some work that one of our undergraduate students, Madeline Sorensen, did. I bring Madeline up here because she is a resident of Cody, and she has been an absolute delight to work with on this project. So this is her work, and really what she did was she went through and classified all 500 animals that were in sort of her assignment to look at their migratory strategy. What I'm showing you here is a little bit of a truncated version. She actually broke them into sort of more nuanced strategies. But for this purpose, I just wanted to show you that we do have kind of a range of migratory strategies in the portfolio of our herds, with our most migratory herd just a little bit over 90% being the Upper Shoshone herd, the one here in our backyard, and the least migratory being the North Bighorn herd. There's some nuance on North Bighorn. As you may know, North Bighorn spans the Bighorn Mountain Range. Animals on the east side of that herd tend to be more resident or predominantly resident, and animals on the west side are much more migratory. So there's some other factors going on there. One of the most exciting things to me about this project is that piece that we talked about at the beginning, being able to turn data around and share it with managers on the timelines that they need to use it. This is a 5-year project, but as you all know, management decisions don't wait 5 years until you have all the data that you want in order to answer these questions. So I'm thrilled to say that we've been able to turn these data around and support managers in the decisions that they need to make. Just a couple of examples here. We've leveraged these data to look at potential highway crossing locations and wildlife vehicle mitigation strategies near Jeffrey City. We've used it to inform turbine sighting recommendations in Laramie County. And then I think, as many of you might be aware, we were very closely working with, of course, the commission, TRW, and the governor's office during the winter of 2022, 2023 to try to help quantify those survival impacts on our ungulate population. So a very exciting piece of the project. All right, I'd like to take my last couple of minutes and just give you a very brief update on some elk work that we're doing it's under the umbrella of this mule deer monitoring program. So this is an effort that we started just last year. We're only 1 year into this piece of the project, but we're really trying to understand what the effect of pretty targeted elk reductions are on mule deer populations. And we're so very fortunate in this work because we have data from mule deer in the Laramie Mountains prior to implementing some pretty aggressive population reduction strategies for elk in that same area. So we know what the mule deer were doing before we implemented some of these new strategies, and we know what they're doing now. In addition, we're able to track and understand how elk are responding to these sort of heightened efforts to harvest animals. So it's a pretty unique opportunity. Like I said, I don't have a ton to show you. We collared, like I said, or maybe I'm not sure if I said, we collared 120 elk as part of this project in 2024. It was 60 in Hunt Area 6 and 60 in Hunt Area 7. We don't do that really intensive cause and mortality work that I described earlier for mule deer populations. We don't do that here, but we do try as we can to understand what's killing elk on the landscape. We had 27 mortalities over the last year. The majority cause of mortality that we were able to document is harvest. So 52% of our marked animals were harvested by hunters. The other interesting thing that we're learning is, particularly in winter, and we knew this already, we knew that the elk grouped up into, call them super groups. I'd like to make a fun rock band name out of that, but I haven't yet. Anyways, we call them super groups, and they can become quite large. And then one of the things we've learned that we didn't know was that they also move much further than we expected in these sort of larger groupings. So much more to come on this project. I think from a management perspective, we're of course going to learn about mule deer responses to these population reductions, but we also have a chance to learn about the formation of these large groups, what causes them to form, when they do, where they go, and how elk are responding to harvest, and potentially how we can use that to better manage populations. So with that, I think that's everything I have for you today, except for one piece. And that's maybe the most important piece. I get to be the person that stands up here and tells you about this work, but this project has become an absolute department effort. It now spans all of our regions, 4 of our 5 divisions, and several of our specialized work units. We could not do this work without the outstanding contributions of our regional biologists and wardens. So it's their projects. I just get to stand up here and share a few updates. So with that, I think I'll take some questions.
Madam Chair, may I? I really appreciate the work you do, and please express that. And this is one of those times I think I speak for everybody on the commission, that I really admire what you do. And thank you for keeping us up and for doing all this work. Real quick questions. The collars that you put on mule deer, are those real-time monitors, or are they the kind that mark and then like upload once a day?
Yeah, good question. So President Linval, Commissioner Masterson, yes, great question. So the collars that we put out, I jokingly call them the Toyota Corolla of collars. They're not the fanciest ones out there, but they do a really good job. So they do both of what you just said. So they store 2-hour locations on the collars. And we'll get those data for the lifetime that the collar's out there. Those are stored. We have to go out and retrieve the collar to get that high resolution 2-hour data. We also have, and it depends on the collar that's out there. We have a couple versions out there, but by and large, we also have 1 point or 2 points that are uploaded to us every day. So we have a general sense of what's going on and where the animals are, but we don't get that fine scale data until we go out and retrieve the collar.
How long do they last, roughly?
Yeah, generally speaking, they last 2.5 years. We did some, I don't know how else to describe it, except some mathematical engineering to be able to get this last batch of collars to last a full 3 years. There's 2 sort of location settings that you can generate on collars. One's called QFP, it's less accurate, and then the other is just a main sort of triangulation that you typically do with GPS. QFP collars last longer, and I don't think their data are very good. So we did a lot of work to make sure we get those higher quality locations on this last batch of collars that we put out.
Are the collars on for life, or are they programmed to fall off?
Yeah, President Linval, Commissioner Masterson, they are programmed to release.
All right. Other than the collaring, what do you do to monitor? You can see where they're going and things like that. Do you do flyovers? What do you do?
Yeah, we do not. We basically rely on the caller to provide us with information on where they're at. We do other aspects of the project that I didn't talk about, like we do some habitat surveys and things like that. So we're interacting with the data quite a bit, but we don't do flyovers or walk in on these animals unless we have a concern. There have been a couple concerns brought up about collar fit, or maybe this animal seems like it's doing something unusual, and in that case we will go out and try to get eyes on them, but as a normal course of action we do not.
Madam President, I guess I took the liberty of not asking you before each question. If it's okay, I'll just rip through these. What's your relationship with the Monteith shop?
Yeah, President Linval, Commissioner Masterson. Kevin and his students are a really valuable partner on our Wyoming range work. So you'll know, I mean, you know about the long-running Wyoming range data that we collect in the western side of the state. We have built a very close relationship with them so that the research data that they're collecting is part of our focal herd data. So it's been a very positive relationship in that area.
Do you have available any sort of statistics that we could use that would show the benefit of the highway crossings? Mortality before, mortality after, game cams showing traffic. Do you do anything like that?
President Linval, Commissioner Masterson, we do not directly. Some of the most robust data for that type of measure is really camera data that's placed on sort of either side of a crossing structure. We could certainly look at movement and use of structures from the collar data that we have, but I don't know if that would get at what you're interested in.
I
Director
was
Bruce
just
might
curious.
know.
If we had numbers, we have something to, just curious. You noted that elk are marked. What do you mean?
Yeah, President Lunval, Commissioner Masterson.
You have the floor with Commissioner Masterson. Let's continue.
Thank you. Yeah, so we fit GPS collars on 120 of those elk. So we're getting that
Oh,
same kind
okay.
of location data.
Okay, I didn't know if marked meant, was a euphemism for over the rainbow bridge.
Oh.
Nothing like that. Okay.
No, they're just wearing their little collars.
Finally, not really for you, but your PowerPoint is different from the one I got in the package.
Yes.
Can you send yours to Ms. Bell and have her forward it? I'm assuming we all have a little bit different.
Yes.
Would you mind doing that?
I'd be happy to do that.
Okay.
And one of the reasons that we changed the PowerPoint was to have those updated survival numbers in there.
Understood. Not being critical,
Oh,
just
that's
want
fine.
the latest and greatest.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam President. All right. Dr. Hall, thanks a lot. I appreciate all this information. So do we have any more information or a better live CWD test?
President Lunval, Commissioner Bell, that question might be best put to our veterinary services folks. I will say that there's a lot of work in progress, and to my knowledge, we do not yet have a test that is defensible and reliable and repeatable for live work. We are approaching some work with Dr. Paul Cross, where I think, and again, Dr. Allen should weigh in on this, but we are using it in a research framework for some animals. It's not at the stage where it could be a reliable diagnostic test.
Okay. So it's potentially, when we lose some of these animals to CWD, potentially they have that when we call them.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will, well, yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Sounds good. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Madam President, if I might, Dr. Hall, could you go back a couple of slides? I was kind of curious on the Wyoming range study on the boundaries, what that was entailed.
Yeah, absolutely. Involve Commissioner Roberts. Yeah, we'll go back just a couple slides here. Maybe. Oh, there was. Okay, I believe you're referring to that bottom, the third bullet from the bottom. You will be hearing more about this work upcoming. Managers have used these data along with a lot of other data that have been collected over the last many, many years to assess the boundaries of that herd unit. It's a proposal right now. You haven't seen it yet, but it will be coming. And I think the proposal that they've put together is very biologically defensible, and it leverages a lot of that good data that's been collected.
Madam President, I guess, so help break that down just a little bit more for me
Sure.
on there, because just so I can understand just a little bit better.
Right. I'll start with where I think you're going and
Okay.
correct me if I get off course. So President Lunval, Commissioner Roberts. So we consider a herd unit to be the area where animals are born, die, reproduce, and face harvest pressure. Sometimes we get that right off the hop when we define these boundaries, and sometimes we don't. And so this is a case where as new information comes in, we're able to build these boundaries in a way that's more biologically justified. I don't want to get into the changes that the regions are proposing because it's still coming up through our review process, but they are leveraging those data to sort of better meet that definition of a herd unit.
Thank you.
Madam President, Dr. Hall, thank you for this information and for your team and all of their work. Do you encounter any landowners that are not very amenable to allow access to department officials to help collect some of this data?
Yeah, good question. President Lunenbaugh, Commissioner Haskell. We do. It is rare. I will say that I have been genuinely blown away by landowner engagement and support and interest in these mule deer herds and commitment to helping us get things right. I don't have a real percentage, but I will say 99% have just been an absolute delight to work with. And in some of these private land dominated herds, we're asking a lot of them to allow us to collar on their properties and then go out and investigate mortalities and then go out and pick up collars. Like, this is a big ask. And by and large, people have just been wonderful. To me, that speaks both to the quality of people that we get to work with as landowners, and it also speaks to the really hard work that our biologists and wardens have invested in making and developing positive relationships.
Yes, that's good. That's very important. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good morning, President Limbaugh, members of the commission, Director Bruce. Here today seeking vote on one new licensed selling agent and the transfer of 3 licensed selling agents. The following application was received for a new. We got one from Bighorn Co-op. They currently have 3 existing locations in the state. Now they want to open a new one in Riverton. Excuse me. There's 3 other agents in Riverton. Total sales of about $268,000 in 2024. And then we've got 3 for transfer. We've got Wyoming Embroidery and Sporting Goods in Green River. We've got Liberty Market, doing business as Buckhorn Travel Plaza in Ranchester, Wyoming. And then we've got Bumgars in Cheyenne, which was formerly Jack's. With that, the department recommends the commission to vote to approve the new Bighorn Co-op license in Riverton and the approval of the 3 transfer licenses for Wyoming Embroidery and Sporting Goods in Green River, Buckhorn Travel Plaza in Ranchester, and Bumgar Supply Incorporated in Cheyenne. And I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions? Do we have a motion?
Madam Chair, I would move to approve the department's recommendation as to all 4.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, you have.
Thank
your
you.
recommendation. Thank you. Chief Weber.
Let's see here. President Lundvall, members of the commission, and Director Bruce. This morning, I just have one property rights item to present to the commission for approval. I'll be talking about the Hobble Creek easements. There are some access easements across some private property to get to a large portion of public property in Lincoln County. We've been working on this one for quite a while. We think it's a great project for the public, and so we're excited to go through the process of getting this completed. So this first slide here shows the location of the easements, just for orientation for the commission. In Lincoln County, on this map, on the southern portion of the map has Kemmerer and Diamondville. On the left-hand side of the map is, you can see Cokeville kind of midway through on this map. The lettering is kind of small on it, but so coming out of Cokeville, there's a purple road that runs north, and then it turns into, so that purple road is the Smiths Fork River Road, and it turns into a BLM road. And then off of that BLM road is this Hobble Creek access easement to get to that bubbled area, that circled area on the map of public property. This access easement is about 20 miles north of Cokeville. So the access easement will provide access to the Smiths Fork River and Hobble Creek, like I said, north of Cokeville. So Hobble Creek comes in from the east and it flows into the Smiths Fork River that runs from the north down. So this will provide better fishing access to both those rivers. And in those rivers, there's populations of Bear River cutthroat trout, brown trout, and mountain whitefish. So good fishing in that area. It also significantly improves the public access for hunting in this area. We're working with 3Y Livestock LLC and EHB Ranch LLC for access across those two property owners. And they've been great to work with. We're really thankful to them for working with us and accepting the offer we presented to them. And once again, the access easement will run northeast from the BLM Road 4213. So Lincoln County has been notified about this project and they have provided a letter of support of it. And so that allows us to use conservation stamp access funds towards the cost of this easement. And we have plenty of money in that fund currently to pay for this project. Okay, so the easement terms, this is a permanent easement, so a one-time payment to both landowners. And so we don't have to deal with yearly payments or anything else, which works out really good. That's $100,000 in total compensation. So they'll be split between the two landowners. So 3Y Livestock will get about $75,000 of that money. And then EHB Ranch will get the other $25,000. And that's kind of split because of the distance of the easement on each landowner. So we fundraised with some of our great NGO partners. We received a grant from the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation of $25,000 to help pay for that easement, which is great. And we really appreciate their help with that. We also worked with the Wildlife Fund to get a grant applied for Onyx to pay for an additional $22,500 of that cost. So once again, thanks to both those organizations for their help with this project. So at this time, I'll be asking the commission for a total of $52,500 in funds out of that conservation stamp access fund to pay for the remainder cost of that $100,000 easement. I have some maps here just to show the location of it, just so everybody understands where this is at. This is kind of zoomed in on the easement itself. You can see the BLM road running north to south on the left-hand side of that map. And then the Hobble Creek easement is in dark yellow, kind of runs up and around. The Smiths Fork River is running on the south side of that access road. And the Hobble Creek Road kind of splits off onto some existing trails in that public property. Hobble Creek comes in from the east and Smiths Fork River comes from the north, and they converge on that private property we're crossing. The access road itself is about 1.5 miles in length. Okay, this map here shows it kind of blown out. Everything on this map that's yellow is BLM property. Everything in blue is state land, and everything in green is U.S. Forest Service property. I just want to kind of show the area that we're trying to get access to on this slide. So you can see the existing trails that are kind of dashed in yellow within that bubbled in area that we circled on the map. We're estimating about 21,000 acres of additional access for the public in this area. On that bubbled area too, on the east side of that, or the right-hand side, there's a mountain ridge that runs up north to south through that area. So we do have access, decent access on the other side of that ridge, on the east side of that ridge. And as you can see, there's like blue spidered trails that run through that area. And so there's good access on that side, but to get across that mountain ridge to this side of the ridge, it's a pretty good hike. So it definitely improves the access to this area for the public for hunting. Got some pictures here just so everybody can see what it looks like. This is the location where the Hobble Creek Road runs off of the BLM road. The Hobble Creek Road's on the right-hand side, and then you have the Smiths Fork River on the left-hand side, kind of winding down through that valley on the private property. I wanted to mention too that this is an access easement to cross these private landowners. They don't allow access on their property, and so we'll have some signage to show that. This next map shows looking kind of northeast, so the other way on this access road. Hobble Creek Road on the left-hand side, Smiths Fork River on the right. And in the background, you can see where the trees are at and everything, that ridge I was talking about with Forest Service property. So it's pretty rugged territory to get through there. So this definitely improves the access to it. Okay, this picture here shows the kind of the ending of the access road where it crosses the Smiths Fork River. As you can see, the roadway itself is actually in pretty decent condition. It's a 2-track. The landowners are not requesting that we do any improvements to the roadway itself. They want to keep it as a 2-track. So it cuts down on the cost of maintenance of the roadway itself too over time. The only cost we would have on the road for maintenance would be if it was to wash out or something, we'd have the ability to fix it. So, and we're also estimating a little bit of money for signage on this, about $1,000. That'll come out of our existing standard budget for that. So I'll stand for questions, but the department recommends the commission vote to approve this access easement to get, and then allow the access or allow the use of conservation stamp access funds towards the purchase. And the ask right now is $52,500 from the commission to pay the remainder cost after our NGO partners have paid their portion.
Thank you. That's a great project with a lot of people partnering and involved to get access. I do have one question, and maybe Meredith can help with this. That conservation stamp access fund, what, just for informational, do we know what's in that fund right now currently?
There's roughly 1.9 million available for the access.
Okay, so we have the funds.
Yes.
Good deal. Any other questions?
Madam President, I just want to encourage the commission to vote for this. I think it's a large component for our cut slam, because the type of cutthroat trout in there, the Bonneville, is that's one of the tougher ones to find, but that would really increase the sportsman's opportunity for that.
Thank you for that fish comment, Commissioner Roberts. Commissioner Masterson.
Madam Chair, agreeing with Commissioner Roberts, as part of the fish caucus, yeah, exactly. I'm all for access. You're going to have a hard time convincing me not to ever not vote for access. But 2 questions: future maintenance, ours, I'm assuming, is part of the easement.
Yeah, so President Ludval, Commissioner Masterson, any maintenance of the roadway itself that comes up, if it was to wash out, would be on us to pay for, correct?
Okay. And you said it's access to the river. And the river obviously is close to the road. How wide is the easement? Do you know off the top of your head? I mean, it does include access to the river. Maybe that's the easy answer.
Yeah, so President Lundvall, Commissioner Masterson, so the access easement itself, I think, is 20-foot wide running down through there. But it runs through those 2 private landowners to get to the trails on the existing public property. And so there's areas you can park right there and fish along both rivers.
Okay. Along this easement, are we allowed access to that river?
No, not right now. There's
Just
discussions.
the road.
Just the roadway for now.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
What is the pleasure of the commission?
Madam President, I believe Commissioner Haskell wanted to motion this.
Madam President, Commissioner Roberts is a mind reader. I will make that motion that we approve the department's recommendation for this access program.
We're not even gonna make him wait till rabbit season setting to do that. Sure, right?
Second.
Do we have a second? All right, any more debate or discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, you have your recommendation. Thank you. Man.
Good morning, Unval, Director Bruce, members of the commission. I'm Nish Goikolea. I'm the Communications and Education Chief, and I'm here to give you our annual Communications, Media, Analytics Update and Report for the department. I'm also joined by our new Public Information Officer, Amanda Fry, who will be jumping in here for some of these slides today. So just an overview. Maybe I'll put this down a little. Just an overview on our communication tools we use for the department. So we have our news and media, our email communications, social media, and our magazine. Since we covered the magazine at the January Commission meeting, we won't be touching that today, but we will go over all these other topics. For the last 4 years, we've been tracking the analytics on all of these so that we could kind of see our trends, see our growth, see our reach. And so all of the information today leans into that. So news releases we've produced over the last 4 years. So as you can see, they continue to go up. We do a standard Monday news packet every single week. So that's 52 out of a year. And so even on top of that, last year, we still produced 234 releases. We have a really robust media team with the department that's across all of the state and includes our public information officer and all of our regional public relations specialists that we lovingly refer to as our INEs. Tara Hodges in the back is our Cody INE, and so contributes all the time to the news and press, social media, et cetera. So this group meets every single week to talk about what we're hearing both internally and externally, what information we want to provide to the public, what the public is asking us questions about, confused about, and then also what the external media outlets are talking about and when we want to jump in and say something, clarify, et cetera. So as you can see, we've continued to grow over the years, and that goal has been really to be leading on our communications and the news. We want to break the department news when possible so that we can tell our story and for our stakeholders and everybody else. As we know, sometimes media tells stories for us, and sometimes those are accurate, and sometimes they're not so much. And so whenever we can put our news out first, we try to. And then there's other opportunities that we've been leaning into to try to clarify things. Some examples include after this legislative session, we put out some releases on some of the bills that passed, specifically otters, hunting from a vehicle, to try to give the public some clarification on what that really means in terms of implementation. We know that our news gets read and it also gets picked up across the state. So we put out regional news releases that pertain specifically to the regions and then statewide as well. And oftentimes, even nowadays, our regional news gets picked up and put across the state. We know that transparency is a really important element for the department to be able to communicate and encourage public trust in the work we do. And so as you'll see, outside of our news that we put out there, we had 5,690 articles that mentioned the game and fish in 2024 alone. We think that number is a little high because of certain things that happened last year. That news reached, we think, around 10.3 billion. We have these analytics and data because we have a scraping tool that grabs anything, whether it be social media, email, news, blogs, anything that mentions the Wyoming Game and Fish Department. So we can track and we get reports on every single time somebody talks about us, whether it's in the state, the nation, or around the world. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over for Amanda to talk about social media and email communications.
President Lundroth, Director Bruce, and Commissioners, I'm Amanda Fry. I'm the new PIO, a Public Information Officer, and I'm very happy to be here. I'm going to talk a little bit about our social media analytics over the past 4 years. We're almost at 5 years worth of analytics, so we're excited about that. As you can see, we've reached millions of people every single year, and we're constantly figuring out new ways how to maximize our engagement. Videos are a key component of what we use as far as our social media products and the posts that we produce, because they tend to attract more followers, they get more reach and more engagement. So right here, you can see 2021 through 2024 analytics for Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Excuse me. Okay. And there's a lot of numbers there, so. What is this? Oh. Back one. Okay. Okay, so the 2024, totals, we have 149,000 fans, followers, and subscribers on our social media, and that's all of our platforms. But our reach is more than 34 million. So we're reaching folks all around the world, millions of people around the world. And that's just from 480 total social media posts from last year. Our YouTube videos are at 1.7 million views, and that's more than 28,000 hours of watch time on there. So our YouTube is doing a lot of cool stuff, and we'll get into that. Okay. So you can see how our reach has continued to grow in the past 4 years, almost 5. And one exciting thing for our YouTube is that in 2021, we were one of the smallest channels in the Western states for wildlife agencies. And now we are one of the largest. We are behind Oregon and Arizona right now, but we are about to pass up Colorado as far as followers go. So that's pretty exciting. I was really happy about that. Okay, and then our email, the tools we use for email, we send out newsletters, media updates, and they're a very popular, very successful part of what we do. One interesting thing is our open rates on those emails are as high as 90%. So the industry standard, you always get those emails and you just kind of scroll past them, you don't open them. Our open rates are as high as 90%. So people are looking for those emails, they are reading our emails, the information we put out. Industry standards 12 to 20%, and we have a nearly 0% unsubscribe rate. So once folks subscribe to our emails, they continue to get that information and they don't try to get rid of it. So that's a really important part of what we do. And that is what I have right now, but thank you so much for your time.
And just a other note on this, we have a bunch of different types of emails too, as you can see. So our hunting update email, fishing, and then Inspire a Kid, which Inspire a Kid continues to grow. And we've been sending that out to families and schools and teachers and kind of giving them more interactive content. If you have that, you'll see that we're doing crafts and activities and cooking and things like that. So trying to be more specialized for what we know people want to see from us and give them options there. Our website, I'm super excited to talk about the website today. So next month will be our 1-year anniversary with our new website. New commissioners, this was a multi-year project for us to get this website built and running, and it went really well, and we're very happy with how it's performing right now. We know that 1.2 million people visited our website over the last year, the new one. And that is considerably higher than people who used to interact with our old website. Some of the things we've been hearing from the public is that it's much easier to navigate. They can find the information. Our search feature works. They know where they can go back, and the content is much more streamlined, whereas before we had a lot of stuff out there over all the years collecting it, and now we're very much focused on what the public is looking for and what we can provide them. We have a new version of the website committee that's come on now, and their focus is very much on content improvement and what other things we can do to provide information to the public and our stakeholders. On a note, we have been audited twice on our new website, unsolicited. And there was a survey that went out for the Fish and Wildlife Agency digital experience, and that was through RBFF, the Recreational Boating and Fishing, and DJ Case researchers. And they looked at our website August of last year, and then they looked at it again last month. And both times we've scored in the 90s. And it's one of the top performing websites when compared to other game and fish websites in other states. And so we're really proud of that as well. And we'll continue to work on improving that number. Let's see here. So the last thing I want to talk about with y'all today is our TV, radio, and podcast. We produce 52 video news pieces a year. Ray Hageman does that for us every single week. Ray puts some news out for TV and radio. And we know that they continue to grow. Also the podcasts, the Get Outside, and we also have an Inspire a Kid one as well now. And so you can see that our podcast plays are continuing to increase quite substantially. And it coincides quite a bit with our YouTube views now that we've been putting those news pieces on YouTube as well. So the public are finding them as well. So lots of great information, lots of growth, and lots of potential to continue growing there, providing information. And my team's always doing really fun, exciting things, whether it's creative or trendy or even humor-based. And so we're always trying to play with new things we see out there. So you'll probably see some new things coming this year as well. And I'll stand for any questions.
May I, Madam? So I'm on social media totals trends. And I'm looking at 21, 22, 23, and 24. There's a huge difference. Reach, engagement, new followers, video views. Unless you tell me otherwise, I'm gonna attribute all that to the new website. Is that correct?
Not necessarily. You know, sometimes we, there's another video thing. We were kind of looking at one of these. Let me show you. And this one, 2021 video reach was crazy, like 7,003,000 in 2021. This was an elk video. It was one video that somebody submitted with the elk in Jackson running down. And so we just got lots and lots of people that were in that. And that happens sometimes. And sometimes it's products that we don't expect to get that much attention. We had another year where we had a fish stocking video the fish division gave us, and they were stocking in the ice, and people were just like amazed. And the questions were so fantastic. Like, how are you doing this? And how are they going to survive? And isn't the water too cold? And it was like this great interactive educational opportunity there. So to answer your question, Commissioner Jolovich, it depends.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Chief. There it is. Social media question.
Good morning, President Lundvall, members of the commission, Director Bruce. Services Division Chief Sean Bibby. Just wanted to hopefully give you my final update on the Jackson Employee Housing Project, at least for the construction portion of it. So I wanted to give you a recap on the project and then just go through the financial aspect of it. From a project review standpoint, we constructed 6 modular homes, each consisting of 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths with 2-car garages. They are all fully occupied as of February. We also constructed a 4-bedroom, 4.5 bath for other employees that would be utilizing that over the course of the year. All of the project included all the site utility work, the grading, domestic water wells, sanitary sewer, with a $13.4 million budget. So not to exceed when the project was originally approved. So I wanted to go through some of the major expenses associated with the project. As you can see, we had a design and construction contract with Jorgensen and Associates. They provided some construction oversight, obviously the design of the site and the modular homes themselves. The actual construction contract at $8.6 million with Dick Anderson. And then you can see some of the other utility expenses that we incurred, including the electrical services, communications, sewer service, and so on. One of the things I did want to mention was that during the construction of the project, we realized that if the department directly purchased the modulars from the manufacturer, that we would realize some sales tax savings from that. So we modified the contract in order to realize those savings, and I'll show you those here on the next slide. And through that, we worked through a contingency that was approved by the commission as a part of the contract. So there were some savings that we realized through the end of the project. And one of the things that I did mention on the sales tax, you can see there, the Stratford direct purchase was $192,000 in savings from doing that. And all in all, we got through the project with $291,000 remaining. So we felt pretty good about that. We do have a few items that we still need to address before we finalize everything, but we're very close. The current project status right now, we just have a handful of punch list items that we're working through with the contractor. Very touch-up kind of work, painting, minor grading work. There is some warranty work going on if we experience a leak or, adjustments, fire alarm replacements, drywall cracks, etc. But those are things that are all under the warranty for the year since we closed on the project. So a few of the things that I mentioned that we still need to work on, we would like to install a privacy fence along the road. So as you come into South Park WHMA, the public enters the main road and goes down towards the area of the feed ground near Flat Creek to, enjoy the unit. The houses are very close to that road, or at least the first two. So we'd like to install a privacy fence there just to maintain some separation between our employees and the public. So we'll be working through that. We do have some landscaping we'd like to add there as well for the same reasons. And then as we got through the end of the project and we did our asphalt paving, we realized that the radiuses as you turn into the garages on the homes are a little narrow, a little more narrow than we'd like. So we'd like to fix that as well this coming summer when the weather's good, and try to widen those out before we experience any issues with folks backing in and out of their driveways. So those are the two things we'd like to fix with the remaining funds, but we anticipate turning the majority of that back to the department. And that's it. And I wanted to say as well that our engineering group and the regional folks that worked through all the nuances of this project did a great job. They worked very hard. As with any construction project, we have a ton of things that we battle, go through over the course of that work. So it was a long, arduous process, but we finally got to the finish line, and wanted to thank the commission as well, because this was a project that was years in the making. And we finally got to a point where we've been able to provide some housing in the Jackson area. So thank you to the commission as well. And with that, I'd stand for any questions.
So can you go to that picture of the plumbing?
You bet.
So that's galvanized, correct?
Madam President, Commissioner Jolovich, I don't believe if the galvanized was used in any fashion on this project, it would be for a good reason. What you're seeing here is from the inside of our pump house, I believe. So that's copper coming out of the top. So anything that's being provided to the unit's going to be.
I looked at that and I thought galvanized, you just don't see that anymore.
Oh, yeah, Madam President, Commissioner Jolovich, all of that plumbing work, everything is modernized. So there wouldn't be anything galvanized that would be.
Okay, thanks, Sean.
You bet.
Madam President, Chief Bibby now. It's kind of a different little optics of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we going into the entry in there in that sharp left corner going in, was it a problem this winter, or are we going to address that because it comes off that slope hill and then it hangs a hard left, and there was I believe there was piping and stuff, or some sort of a hydrant or something was right there. Has that been an issue, or are we looking at maybe changing that entry? Thank you.
Yeah, Madam President, Commissioner Roberts. Those are the things that we're gonna try to address with some of that asphalt work. But I know where you're talking about, and I have not heard that it's been an issue up to this point in that particular space. So unless we need to maybe widen it out on the other side, if we can do that, we'll take a look at that. But the residents have not reported an issue to us at this time. So I think we're okay there. And obviously they get a higher snow load in that area. So one of the things that we'll likely be doing is starting to add markers to things that we are concerned about with vehicles or snow plows or any of those things. So they'll be able to see those.
Madam Chair, thank you. What feedback are you getting from the folks who are living there?
President Lundvall, Commissioner Masterson, so far it's been very good feedback. They've been extremely pleased with the accommodations that have been provided. We're working very hard to make sure that, we don't have continuing issues with any of the internal, mechanical systems and things like that. But up to now, all of the feedback that we've received has been very, very positive. So very, very happy to hear that. They've been very thankful and appreciative. So. Thank you.
Before we get started on our next agenda item, we are going to take a short break. So if everyone could be back here in 5 minutes, we'll keep going. Thank you.
President Lundvall, Director Bruce, members of the commission. My name is Justin Benfit, Deputy Chief of Wildlife. So I am here today to talk to you guys about our mule conversations and our next step forward. And while that presentation's loading, I should say, most of you have kind of heard this. We talked about this back in January, but for the benefit of Commissioners Haskell and we're gonna start from the beginning and give a little explanation as to what we did and why. So with that, I'm going to start off by thanking some assistance from some UW personnel. We had some folks at our YSAC office, well, the YSAC office at the University of Wyoming, contribute to the analysis of the comments that you guys are about to see. So I'd like to thank Dr. Christy Palmer and also Dr. Kelly Dunning with the UW lab. Their efforts were very much appreciated in this. And I guess I should also say, before I get into this, I'd really like to thank all of the efforts on behalf of our department personnel. All of our local game wardens, biologists, coordinators, regional wildlife supervisors, the I&E folks, the communications folks put a lot of work into these mule deer community conversations, and their efforts are very much appreciated. So why are we here? I guess we all know why we're here, but just to reiterate, mule deer populations have been declining. Mule deer populations have been declining for quite some time. If you look at this historical graph, from a population peak in the early 90s compared to where we are today, mule deer populations have declined substantially. If you look at just in the early 90s, our peak in mule deer harvest statewide compared to where we're at today, mule deer harvest has declined by 85% across the state. And more acutely, I should say, we had the 22-23 winter. We've all talked about this. You guys all know about this, but we had some really unprecedented mule deer losses in parts of the state. Western Wyoming, Wyoming Range area, some of those areas down by Baggs were hit especially hard. And with those acute winter losses that were at a scale that frankly we had never seen, we kind of felt like collectively it was time to, hey, let's get this back out in front of the public. Let's re-engage with the public and let them tell us where they would like to go with mule deer management in the future. So what did we do? What was the goal? Well, the goal of these community conversations, first and foremost, was to have a face-to-face meeting with our wardens and biologists, our local field personnel.
I'd like to stress that we also have a lot of new personnel in our agency. We're somewhere in the neighborhood of 50% of our game wardens have been hired just in the last 5 years. So this was really a beneficial two-way street. It provided the avenue for the public to have face-to-face informal meetings with their local managers. And it also provided our managers a really good chance in an informal setting to get to know some of their engaged constituents. So as what we did is we held a series of meetings across the state, and we wanted these meetings in localities all around. So in places we held them where we don't even tend to hold traditional season setting meetings, like places like Elk Mountain or Medicine Bow or Woods Landing. We first and foremost wanted to ask the public what their thoughts are on regarding mule deer management. Where should we go from here in the long term, given the state of mule deer populations as they are? But also, what are some of the public ideas on what we can do to bolster mule deer populations and just enhance mule deer conservation? So with these 37 meetings, here's a breakdown by region. Most of the regions had multiple meetings other than our really small regions. And really they were deemed largely successful. We got a lot of public feedback. We incorporated comments from these meetings. So we had 486 attendees in person throughout the state. This resulted in 52 written or mailed or online comments that was generated to us. But in addition to that, there was just a lot of discussion at all these meetings. And so our folks that attended tried to capture all the comments as best as they could that they heard that night, and they then summarized those. So the comments that we're about to go through here in a minute reflect not only these 52 written comments, but just also all the conversation that was held at these meetings. So just a few thoughts that the public expressed about the meeting format. All in all, this was extremely positive. Folks resoundingly really loved this informal format. I think one of the things that we did learn, there was a handful of comments that would have liked some of these meetings to kick off with a more formal presentation on the state of mule deer herds in their areas and then launch into that informal feedback process. We directed our folks to really keep this as informal as possible. And the whole goal was to do a lot more listening than talking. And so that's why a lot of the meetings didn't actually have formal presentations, but lesson learned going forward. You know, what did some of the participants say about mule deer themselves? They run the gamut. You know, we frankly didn't hear any comments from the public that we aren't accustomed to hearing or haven't heard before, but it's still really valuable. It's really valuable to give the public that opportunity to express themselves, and it's really valuable, again, for our folks to hear it. And the other thing that I think is most valuable about this process is to understand how concerns about mule deer, what to do about mule deer, and where we should go in the future regarding mule deer management can vary by region. And that was really borne out in this process. So for example, you know, comments about wind and solar and concerns regarding that renewable resources were really prevalent in the Green River region. In the Pinedale region, there was a lot of concern, as you heard from the gentleman that testified yesterday, about eliminating general license opportunity. In other places, you know, the role of predation was a much more prominent concern. So just given the nature of this process, that most of the comments were actually synthesized based on input received at that meeting, and there was only 52 written or online comments. The kind folks at UW that helped with this analysis used what they call a qualitative analysis rather than just simply crunching numbers and saying who said what. And I'm just going to kind of leave it at that because I'm not a social scientist and I don't stay in my wheelhouse here. So is what they implemented what they call thematic coding. So it's basically what are the common themes that emerged by region. And I guess for the folks in the audience or listening in don't know this, but all the commissioners and Director Bruce were handed out a reorganized comment summary of all this that kind of puts this in a concise way. But so we're going to go through that basically in just a little bit different format. And I realize what I'm about to do is going to be just a little bit tedious, but I'd like to go through all these comment by comment, just so you guys and everyone listening gets an understanding of just how much these kind of themes can vary by region. So just to start this off, in the Jackson region, one of the first things that folks wanted to tell us about was they would like to see more CWD stats provided to them in real time and implement more mandatory CWD testing. Just more education about CWD in general. And then there was also an awful lot of discussion on improving habitat quality. When it comes to just population and harvest management, the prevailing theme in the Jackson area was, and of course, the Wyoming range herd was the herd hit hardest by that 22-3 winter. So that was certainly fresh on people's minds. And that is for us to just do whatever it takes to restore mule deer populations as quickly as possible. Winter deer feeding came up in this area. That's long been a point of contention in some of that Star Valley, Wyoming range area. Lots of comments throughout all these regions you'll see is to implement antler point restrictions and conversion to limited quota. But there was concerns about implementing mandatory harvest reporting in this part of the state. This is something that's also come up in the past. There's folks that feel that we could improve our harvest reporting process. One theme that only really emerged in this part of the state was interest in more weapon type restrictions, long range shooting restrictions, just promoting, and in their opinions, what are fair chase ethics. And of course, and then predator population reduction was also brought up. Now we get to the Cody region. The Cody region had a really pronounced emphasis on CWD management. This is a function of the efforts of our personnel. First and foremost, CWD has been a big deal throughout the Bighorn Basin, during our CWD process where we were developing the plan 5 years ago. There was really good attendance at meetings throughout the Cody region. Our managers have really been messaging this. Unfortunately, the Bighorn Basin is now home to some of the most significant CWD issues in the state, where we have a couple herds with prevalence exceeding 40% and other herds in the 20 and 30% range. Habitat quality and land use came up, as it does in throughout the other regions, but emphasis on continuing to conduct habitat treatments. There was some comments on assessing the impacts of livestock grazing, emphasis on improving forest management, and better understanding the effects of development. Some comments regarding just how can we improve fencing, promote wildlife, facilitate wildlife fence crossing throughout the region. Coordination with our federal partners. With respect to population and harvest management, there were several comments about implementing limited quota seasons, adjusting season dates, lengths, and times, implementing antler point restrictions. Some more comments about restricting technology to promote fair chase, and then reducing non-resident hunting pressure. With habitat quality and land use, comments about addressing habitat degradation in the Bighorn Bay. Oh, excuse me. One last thing I would want to say, I think I skipped over this, but in the Bighorn Basin, invasion of cheatgrass was also first and foremost in a lot of people's minds. It's one of the worst parts in the state for that. And as cheatgrass can degrade mixed mountain shrub communities, those concerns were borne out. So now moving on to our Sheridan region, again, more concerns about habitat degradation, concerns about subdivision were fairly prominent in this region, which is kind of understandable if anyone that spends time in the Buffalo Sheridan area or even the Sheridan portion of the Black Hills knows there's been an awful lot of subdivision gone on in the past couple decades. Concerns were expressed about reducing grazing pressure on state lands, particularly in the Sheridan Buffalo area. So As usual, concerns come up about limiting doe hunting, implementing antler point restrictions, increasing doe hunting to actually improve buck ratios. So just in some people's minds, better balancing the number of does with bucks. Eliminating crossbows came up during the archery seasons. Your typical adjusting season dates, lengths, and times to reduce harvest pressure on mule deer. And then reducing whitetail numbers was also fairly prevalent within the Sheridan region. Whitetail deer are seen as competing with mule deer from the perspectives of a lot of landowners and the public. With respect to habitat, now getting down into the Green River region, the southwest part of the state, addressing habitat quality was the predominant theme down there. Encouragement for us to continue to implement habitat projects to benefit mule deer, water development projects. There was quite a bit of concern expressed regarding potential impacts from, I guess, hunters' perceptions of livestock grazing on public land. Reducing cheatgrass and conifer encroachment came up. And like I talked earlier, a lot of emphasis on potentially reducing the impacts of wind and solar developments. The Green River region experiences quite a bit of that. The usual comments came in about managing hunting pressure. Discussions were and really debate went back and forth as to whether or not we should have limited quota versus general seasons there. And big in the Green River region was the promotion of youth hunting opportunities. Concerns about ATV use came up in several places. And more suggestions to continue to implement antler point restrictions. Also in the Green River region, CWD management and mandatory CWD testing came up. There's an awful lot of support in places where hunters and the public feel like CWD is concerned for us implementing mandatory testing to ensure the data we get is reflective of the true prevalence on the ground. That's something that we do implement in a handful of areas around the state. And predator control also came up in the Green River region. So moving on to the Laramie region, I'm going to skip ahead one slide because I'd be remiss if I didn't say, and you'll notice this in the eastern regions, predator control was by far the most predominant theme in the Laramie region. It came up fairly significantly in all their meetings. So suggestions to liberalize mountain lion take and coyote removal. Backing up, the usual, facilitate more habitat improvement projects around the state or around the region, excuse me. There were concerns expressed about managing livestock grazing and wild horses in the far western part of the region. Competition came up there with respect to whitetails, but also elk numbers. And Dr. Hall touched on that earlier with the study going on in the Laramie region to look at just that. And also encouragement to, like we hear everywhere, to continue to conduct habitat treatments to benefit mule deer. There was a lot more interest in the Laramie region to convert areas from general to limited quota statewide. More suggestions just to continue to have as conservative hunting seasons as we can, whether that's antler point restrictions, suggestions to even close areas for a certain amount of time to allow mule deer to recover. And I should say that with all these suggestions, it actually fostered some debate because some of the meeting attendees also were opposed to these wholesale changes. CWD management was also a concern expressed throughout most of the Laramie region. The southeast part of the state is the area that's been dealing with chronic wasting disease the longest. And so management efforts have been tried. Some have been successful, some not as much as far as us actually getting management off the ground. So there continues to be a lot of interest both from our managers and the public in trying to manage CWD in herds in southeast Wyoming. So Lander region, overgrazing by livestock was concern expressed in the Lander region. There was a lot of emphasis on wildlife crossing structures in the Lander region. We have the project with the Upper Wind River herd and the Du Bois country where we're trying to get some wildlife crossing structures installed. Folks recognize that's a significant source of mortality for mule deer in that area. Reduction of competition from elk and whitetail came up, and also understanding the impacts of just human development. So kind of the usual came up in the Lander region, suggestions to implement antler point restrictions, convert to limited quota management, some emphasis on managing for older age class animals, exploring different license types or even pricing to manage hunting structure, enhanced predator removal, liberalized lion harvest, coyote take, that sort of thing. Moving on into the Casper region, continuing to support habitat projects for mule deer, reduction of impact of livestock grazing on BLM lands came up. Improving forage quality through protein testing of sagebrush came up, just general habitat improvement project support. In the Casper area, this is something that continues to come up. Suggestions to close seasons for 1 to 5 years to allow mule deer to recover. That's still a common perception for folks in this part of the world that needs to happen. There's a lot more support for implementing limited quota, either statewide or regionally in the Casper area. Comments came up again about restricting weapon types. Continue to eliminate or reduce doe fawn licenses. There are suggestions about managing for better genetics and more suggestions about promoting CWD management in the region. Predator management was also really pronounced in the Casper region. It came up in all the meetings. So last region, Pinedale region, there was a lot of debate on what to do with management here going forward. It's, whether or not to implement antler point restrictions, whether or not to convert areas from general to limited quota, season lengths, all those sorts of things. Mandatory harvest reporting also came up in the Pinedale region. That seems to be a Western Wyoming perception that needs to happen. And reduction of non-resident hunting numbers. It was also recognized, the value of highway crossings were recognized in the Pinedale area. As you guys are aware, we have significant crossing structures that have been put in place in the Pinedale Daniel area and then down closer to Big Piney. Competition from elk, whitetail deer, and livestock came up. More suggestions to promote habitat projects beneficial to mule deer, whether that's sagebrush mowing, water developments, mitigating impacts from oil and gas, and also just concern for just how we manage following harsh winters came up, understandably so. So I know that was a lot. I kind of went through that really quickly. Now, I guess I would like to, just as we talked about it back in January, remind folks that this is just one piece of the puzzle. These mule deer meetings were really, really valuable. We're really glad we did them. But it is just one piece of the puzzle with respect to public comment that we take regarding all of our wildlife management, but mule deer in particular. The other thing that preceded this was our extensive hunter attitude survey that was launched in late 2023. Now I'm going to go through that here in a minute. This is much more of a quantitative analysis because we reached a lot of people with this survey. So in late 2023, we surveyed just shy of 78,000 resident deer hunters. We received over 10,000 responses. And when we weeded out those responses based on eliminating folks that had not reported hunting within the last 3 years, we still had almost 7,500 responses to gauge from around the state. So a really, really big, robust sample. So the key takeaways here, well, first and foremost, we learned, and it's really frankly not surprising, is that more deer equates to better hunter satisfaction. So we ask a whole suite of questions in this survey. Based on hunter preferences for management, hunter experiences, and how satisfied they've been with their hunting opportunities. So far fewer deer equates to lower satisfaction. Other factors such as like hunter crowding that we hear about play much less of a role in hunters' perceptions of how satisfied they were. So here's a quick little snapshot of that based on our best available information at the time. If you look at statewide mule deer populations in 2012, I should back up, I'm sorry. We've launched these hunter attitude surveys on almost every 5 years, going back to 2007. So we've done them in 2007, 2012, 2017, and then again in 2023. So if you look at our statewide mule deer population estimates back then, when we had, just 374,000, hunter satisfaction was 74%. When we showed a slight uptick 5 years later in mule deer numbers, hunter satisfaction even improved a little bit. Then you fast forward to late 2023 when we launched this survey, hunter satisfaction went down quite a little bit. It almost dropped in half. The other key takeaway from this survey was that hunters do not want to lose opportunity. This is pretty loud and clear in these data. So residents generally support the current management framework that we have across the state, which is a mixture of limited quota and general license management. Hard to draw areas coupled with anyone can just get a license over the counter. There was fairly significant opposition to any changes to this season structure, even if they would reduce crowding. And there was, I should say, support expressed in this survey for mandatory harvest reporting and addressing chronic wasting disease. So what else have we done? What are the other pieces of the puzzle? So we have, in addition to the hunter attitude survey, these mule deer conversations, we collect a lot of other public input data regarding mule deer. So every year, as a course of just routine business, when we send out our harvest surveys statewide, we allow those folks that fill out a survey to furnish comments to us as to their satisfaction or what they would like us to consider going forward. It's a fairly open-ended thing. We roll those comments and send them out to all of our managers. We, just as a course of routine job duties for all of our field folks and our regional administrators, we're talking to hunters, landowners, outfitters, our key constituents all the time. So all those things fit into the public input that we receive. We also, I give a little history here on where we've been with, most of you have heard of our mule deer initiatives. So Dr. Dan Thompson touched on this just real briefly yesterday. He mentioned the deer wars, and that was really a Western Wyoming thing, and it goes back to the early 90s when really liberal harvest was prescribed and it followed a tough winter, and there was just a lot of concern over Wyoming range mule deer management. And that kept on going. And so as we got into the mid 2000s, as those concerns continued, the department decided it was time to develop a mule deer initiative. And with that, it basically provided a format or a guideline for us to follow to engage. It lays out all the issues and factors affecting mule deer, but also for how to engage with our constituents in a meaningful manner to go forward. So that culminated in the first real mule deer initiative that was launched in the Wyoming range. And that was soon followed by our Platte Valley Mule Deer Initiative. And those initiatives resulted in a series of stakeholder meetings, some over the course of 2 years. And they formulated some management direction going forward. I wouldn't call it an actual management plan. But just to give you an example of what was born out of those processes, in the Platte Valley, there are 4 hunt areas in that, and I'm talking in the Saratoga area, where it would be the west slope of the Snowy Range and the east slope of the Sierra Madres. Those areas actually converted from a general license to a limited quota structure following input in that mule deer initiative. Now there was a lot more to it than just management. Stemming from that also was born the Platte Valley Habitat Partnership, where a whole suite of habitat projects have been implemented for a decade plus now, that were derived from that process. And again, we collect the hunter attitude survey information that I just went through. We also held that really extensive CWD management collaborative process back in 2019 and 2018, 2019, which culminated in the formulation of our CWD management plan. And we also conduct occasional just outreach every time we have these special, research projects, these like all the stuff that Dr. Hall presented this morning, all the landowner engagement that's required to have a radio collar study or a monitoring study. There's a lot of public engagement that follows all those processes. So now here's kind of the meat of what we're here to talk about today, I guess, is where do we go from here? What do we do now? It's pretty clear, based on the comments and the input received through these mule deer management meetings. When you couple that with all the other forms, including of public comment we get, including that hunter attitude survey, that at a statewide perspective, from a 30,000-foot view, there's really not the appetite from the public for wholesale sweeping changes to mule deer management. And when I say wholesale sweeping changes to mule deer management, I'm talking about statewide conversion from general license hunting to limited quota, or even things like resident regions that may really restrict where folks can hunt, or if they can hunt multiple areas. So and in recognition of the support for the current management framework, the department does not feel at this time that there's sufficient public support to really go down that road of changing our mule deer management. But that's a big deal. And I think, and as we talked about back in January, if this is the route we're going to go, which is our recommendation, at least for now, we have to recognize a few things. If we're not prepared, and I should say not we, the public is not prepared to make some of these changes, even following those really catastrophic winter losses in parts of the state 2 years ago, and recognizing that mule deer populations are as low as most folks have seen, at least in their adult lifetime. If the public is still not there to make in support for making these wholesale changes, we need to embrace that. We need to adopt it, and we also need to message that. We need to be very clear about where we're going to go in the future with mule deer management. I should say though, following the input with these meetings, there was, and we talked about this back in January, there was a lot of risk in conducting these meetings because we had some of our managers saying, holy cow, if we're gonna, there's a lot of media outreach, advertising this effort. If we're gonna take the time to meet with our public around the state and we don't make a bunch of changes, are we gonna just continue, signify to the public, yeah, this is a dog and pony show. We came and talked to you about mule deer, but in reality, we're not gonna make any changes. And those perceptions can always be there with some members of the public that come and talk to us, and then they don't get the changes that they advocate for. There was risk in that. But like I said back in January, there's never risk in actually conducting outreach to our stakeholders. At the end of the day, even if wholesale changes aren't made, it's still a very positive thing. It's relationship building. It's us continuing to hear from our constituents. But we did make some changes that did stem from these meetings. So there are places where, our new draft, our revised draft regulations just launched yesterday afternoon. So you guys can see what the regions are now proposing. Some of these, like antler point restrictions being proposed in the bighorns, were born directly out of input from this process. The Green River region wants to continue to expand youth opportunities. That was fairly prevalent input in their region. The Laramie region is proposing some fairly significant hunting season date changes to 3 or 4 hunt areas in southeast Wyoming. There is a proposal in the Pinedale and Jackson areas in the sublet herd and the Wyoming range herd to, despite mule deer numbers being where they're at, to actually liberalize some hunting season dates. Again, this is for male harvest only, so we're not, this is more about just increasing hunting opportunity. There were comments in that part of the state that felt like the condensed hunting season timeframe actually exacerbated crowding and deteriorated hunting quality more than folks wanted. So there are changes that were made directly stemming from this outreach effort. The next thing we need to do is we need to close this feedback loop with our meeting participants. So the handouts that you guys got today will be emailed to all those folks that attended our meetings that furnished an email address. Our communications folks are also planning to just launch this more on a statewide level as well, as just part of our information packet. Really, one of the next big steps that we're going to embark on is an internal mule deer manager meeting. And so we've done all this external outreach for so long now, but is what we haven't really done internally. And like I talked earlier today about just the sheer amount of new folks we have working in our wildlife division, wardens and biologists both. We feel like it would be really prudent to check the pulse on all of our managers. We kind of all know where we sit, but we haven't really done a really good job of quantifying that or qualifying it. So we intend to launch an internal survey to solicit our managers' feedback on where we should go from here. And the other thing that this will do is this will allow us a very good opportunity to reassess where we think we need to go in the future with some other conservation-based actions. So whether that's a recommendation to you all to re-up the mule deer initiative funding for mule deer specific or centric habitat work, it may be more extensive or an expansion of the monitoring program, recommending more money for aerial surveys to, as Dr. Hall talked about earlier, to continue to improve our population estimation techniques around the state. So that's really our next plan. And following what those folks tell us internally from that survey, we plan to then get a subset of our folks together to have a really focused meeting on mule deer management going forward. The other thing we need to continue to do, and I would like to really emphasize this, is we need to manage public expectations with this. We always get suggestions on what to do with mule deer management, and it's really clear from talking to the public when you convene a mule deer community conversation like we did, or you have a public season setting meeting, there are a lot of folks that think some of the changes they would like to see or suggest are going to actually result in more mule deer. And like we talked about this back in January, suggestions to implement antler point restrictions, to convert from a general license area to limited quota, to continue to slash non-resident participation, shorten season dates, all those things. They do some things for mule deer and hunting opportunities, and there's some things they don't. And is what they don't do is they don't put mule deer fawns on the ground. They don't increase mule deer doe survival. We harvest so few mule deer does collectively across the state. These hunting seasons are not the reason that are holding mule deer back. Any one of us that's ever stood up in front of the public or the commission that talks about this will emphasize that, but we need to continue to message that and perhaps even enhance how we message that. In addition, despite all of the really, really good work that we do when it comes to things like long-term investments in mule deer habitat projects, that is money well spent. And we feel like absolutely it's beneficial in the long term to do that, or we wouldn't be doing it. But even with that, we need to manage mule deer expectations. If we go treat a bunch of cheatgrass or remove juniper out of riparian areas or burn some mixed, true mountain mahogany, it's not going to result in a whole bunch more mule deer overnight. We think it will help benefit us in the long run, or we wouldn't be doing it. But even those expectations need to be managed. Coyote removal, increased mountain lion harvest. Those are things that can and have been done and are being done. but they don't necessarily equate to a bunch more mule deer overnight. If you look at county, all the partnership we've done with through the ADMB and the county predator boards, we have dramatically enhanced coyote removal efforts throughout a lot of the state. And we're not just teaming with mule deer. If you look at just mountain lion harvest over the past couple decades, and Dr. Thompson touched on this yesterday, it's really increased in a lot of places. And again, it hasn't really bolstered mule deer numbers significantly. That's not to say we shouldn't try any of these things. I don't want to send that message whatsoever. Is what I do want to send the message is we need to manage expectations on what we can realistically do to improve mule deer populations over the long run. With all these changes, though, there's a natural tendency for folks to say, okay, mule deer numbers are struggling. You guys are offering unlimited opportunities in places for a resource that's in decline. You guys message how much mule deer populations are struggling as evidenced by the first graph I threw up there. It doesn't comport with some people's logic that you could still have an unlimited number of general licenses in any number of areas we have across the state. So again, we need to manage what the expectations of what those seasons or changing those seasons will do for mule deer, what they won't do, and what they'll also do for your hunting opportunities. Because with any of these suggested changes, there's a domino effect. So let's just take, for example, if born out of this process or at any future time, we decide that we need to, like we did in the Platte Valley through that mule deer initiative back in the day, if we need to convert a handful of areas, 5, 6, whatever, 7 areas from a general license area to limited quota, there's a ripple effect through that, because the more areas that we convert to limited quota, the more pressure you put on your remaining general license areas. And at some point you can reach some threshold, and none of us know where that is right now, but some threshold whereby we would need to just simply convert all areas to a limited quota structure, because there would just be so much hunting pressure, which again is not so much of a concern when we're only harvesting male mule deer, but it's also managing hunting quality around the state. And folks, hunting quality is a very subjective thing. Satisfaction with a hunt area, while it's really tied to numbers like I talked about, is also subjective. But hunting quality means different things to different people. For some people, it means more deer. For some people, it means a 30-inch deer, behind every other shrub. For some people, it's just getting out with friends and family and the opportunity to go. The other thing that we really need to continue to message and enhance our messaging on are what are the real drivers of mule deer populations. We talk about the 22-23 winter losses, but the reality, and we talk about predation, we talk about harvest, general license hunting, whatever it may be. The reality is the biggest drivers of mule deer population have been and will continue to be habitat quantity and quality and weather. When, only weather can result in 70% losses to a herd like we experienced in Wyoming range. But that same weather and those same climatic, the same climate that then ensued is also the reason why we saw enhanced fawn survival and fawn production this last year. So just using that as an example, yeah, it was a catastrophic winter. We lost 70, 75, depending on where you're at, up to 80% of our deer herd in those places. But it also resulted in incredible snowpacks that rejuvenated habitats. And following the lag effects coming out of that bad winter, doe survival, fawn production in 2023 was pretty poor. But the landscape was rejuvenated. There were a lot less mouths on the landscape, and it resulted in, coupled with, thankfully, a fairly mild 23-24 winter, those adult females entering that winter in phenomenal nutritional condition. And that resulted in really excellent fawn production. Fawn birth weights, like Dr. Hall talked about earlier, were much, much higher. And therefore, you roll that into 2024, and the Wyoming range and the sublet herd right next door experienced the best fawn production they've seen in decades. So again, weather, habitat, quantity, quality are by far the biggest drivers. Disease is a huge driver in parts of the state. There's no doubt. Dr. Hall also alluded to earlier today that is what we would expect to see for adult survival, adult female survival would hover between 75 and 85%. I've been a part of 3 long-term CWD research projects in the Casper area. And in all of those, everywhere we've looked, adult survival in those cases was between 65 and 72%. CWD in those populations is playing a substantial role. It was also coupled with mountain lion predation, tied for the leading cause of death in those areas. But CWD is not necessarily the same concern that it is in western Wyoming, knock on wood, hopefully, and at least as of now. But it is one of the significant drivers in parts of the state. Competition is always a tough nut to crack for us. We recognize the potential is there in a lot of places. In some parts of the state, whether it's Buffalo, Sheridan, Black Hills, or even in the Bighorn Basin or riparian areas, we can get a real overabundance of whitetails when conditions are right. And there's perceptions there that whitetail competition is really resulting in, declining mule deer productivity. That's really tough for us to ever estimate and analyze despite some of our best efforts. Other concerns may be that whitetails are serving as a reservoir for chronic wasting disease. So they're contributing to the environmental contamination of prions. We deal with concerns about elk competition. Obviously, we recognize the potential is there, or we wouldn't be launching the study that Dr. Hall talked about earlier this morning. Elk populations have absolutely flourished in a lot of central and eastern Wyoming compared to where they were 25 years ago. Those are all things we're looking at. Human activity, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that, whether it's subdivision and conversion of the landscape to 5, 10, 40-acre ranchettes, whether it's large-scale oil and gas, where there's some fairly definitive literature on avoidance and impacts from oil and gas, whether it's wind and solar. The proliferation of some of these wind farms across the state is very dramatic, and it's a huge landscape scale conversion. Those are all concerns that we need to continue to message, and these far outweigh any changes that we can and ever could make to hunting season structure. Finally, just to wrap this up, I should say it's not all doom and gloom. There will be some better times ahead. Like we just talked about we had some really, really good positive trends in mule deer fawn production in parts of the state. In some of the state, it was the best that's been seen in decades. In particular, the Casper region experienced some really, really good fawn production this year. That Bag, Saratoga area had really, really high fawn production, and also in western Wyoming, the Wyoming Range sublet herd. So there's a little bit of good news. The unfortunate thing is mule deer populations can and will fluctuate. That's going to happen. The unfortunate thing that we've seen is if you look at a series of years, whether that be 5 or 10 years, the population highs tend to be a little bit lower than they were in the past, and the population lows are also a little bit lower. We don't know. We don't have a crystal ball. We can't tell you that populations are continuing to decline compared to where they're at now. But we do know we're also going to experience some rebounds in places, and we fully expect to. We just hope Mother Nature also cooperates. So the last thing I guess I would say, and this gets back to that managing expectations piece, is that when I look at, and I'll save myself from making any age-related jokes for Commissioner Masterson's benefit. But when you look at a cross section of the hunters that come talk to us, a lot of folks remember what mule deer numbers were like in the 70s and the 80s and the early 90s. I'm old enough to even remember what it was like in the late 80s and early 90s. And and that's still the baseline that an awful lot of folks expect for where, I guess, the baseline for what they think mule deer numbers can and should be. And frankly, it's just not realistic. And we need to not ever do anything to insinuate that we can get back there. Mule deer numbers in the 70s and 80s, and by most accounts, and I guess this would be true in all of Western North America. Every other Western state, Canadian province is dealing with the same thing. Mule deer numbers in the 60s and 70s and 80s were likely higher than they were before Europeans set foot on this continent. And that's not where our benchmark should be. Having said that, we should continue to do everything we can to conserve and bolster mule deer populations to the extent possible. So that's all I have, and I'll stand for any questions.
Madam President, I can start. So, Justin, thank you. I think the best presentation I've seen on mule deer and most informative, maybe not from a scientific perspective on specific, but just overall, this is great. I appreciate that. I appreciate what the department did, all the information you took in, and I really want to try to incorporate that to maybe some actionable things or some things coming from the department to the commission saying, this is what we garnered from that. And so let's talk about a little bit about what can put more fawns on the ground or what can keep more mule deer alive, and some of those things, I think you talked about that competition in managing white-tailed deer and elk. We're doing that. I think we're actively have been for a while. It's not easy. Certainly in certain places, it's not easy at all, but we're actively trying to do that, and we're going to continue to do that. I'm curious to hear what not only the department, I think all of the department, because this would take everybody, but that mandatory harvest reporting for mule deer, I think that would be help. And I think that we haven't heard a lot of, and maybe you can correct me, I don't know if this is a question or just comments, but was there any negative feedback on somebody having to report?
So President Lundvall, Commissioner Bell, not that I'm aware of. It's certainly a suggestion that's been proffered multiple times in the past. It's born out of a public perception and concern that we're not adequately capturing or understanding mule deer harvest, or that our estimates are somehow off. I think if we're really being honest and fair, there's some legitimacy to that too, but this is very nuanced. So for the most part, mule deer harvest reporting is complicated because of general licensing. And, in our limited quota areas, we feel like it's a really robust data set and stand behind it, and it meets statistical rigor to do that. With respect to general license reporting, you have to actually survey a subset, is what we try to do, is survey 26% of license holders by the county in which they purchased it. The complicating factor is one can then hunt multiple general areas and that sort of thing. And so it's certainly not perfect. And I would say that a mandatory harvest reporting, when it comes to that, could probably improve the accuracy to some extent, but probably not significantly. And so the question becomes, is it worth it? And if we start going down the road of potential implementing mandatory harvest reporting, the other bigger conversation that we need to have is, what are the repercussions if we do implement that? Are we going to use a carrot or a stick approach? And when we've discussed it internally, at least in the past, now we haven't had the discussion in the last year. Certainly we have a new division chief, we have a new director, those sorts of things, but is where we've arrived in the past is that we just weren't ready to go down that road yet, because we didn't really feel like, pardon the metaphor, but like the juice was worth the squeeze type thing, that it will likely not improve our estimates enough to be worth having at least what could be perceived to be a heavy-handed enforcement mechanism behind that for non-compliance. There are some benefits to it though. If, certainly through our our website. And now that we have like an online profile for hunters to go into when they apply for licenses or they get their CWD test results, that sort of thing, that harvest survey could actually be automated through that profile, through our website easier, which would actually reduce costs potentially in the long run. There would certainly be an incursion of some short-term expenditures to get something like that up and running.
And just, Madam President, I'll just follow up on that and maybe even a conversation about, and I know you and I have had this, but on doe harvest, I think that's something that we continually get asked about. It comes up in all kinds of regions. There is some potential for mule deer doe harvest, but I think what a mandatory or reporting on that, we would find out exactly how many does are being harvested, and are there any other ways, and if there are any other ways of moving or why is that maybe not a good idea, or the challenges with that. I think that's worth some more conversation so that the public understands when there is that opportunity in those areas. There's a reason there's that opportunity in those areas, and there's a reason that we don't just take those mule deer somewhere else, or we don't do that a different way. Or is there a possibility in certain areas that we can do some of those things and to keep some of those baby makers on the landscape and see if they can keep doing what they do. So I think that's something that I don't know if this is the time or the place, because that's a long question, but something that we can continue to talk about. I know predator management, I think we work on that. We've changed some of the things. I don't think that the public, and I don't think that the world is ready for us to go back to the way we managed predators in the 60s and the 70s. I just feel like that probably wouldn't be a good place for us to be. While I say that, it was effective. And so, but we're probably not going back to that. And so there's really, on that side of it, there's only so much you can do on predators. And I think we're working on that, and we're continuing to work on that. Wildlife crossings takes a lot of money, but that probably would keep more animals on the ground. If we had every crossing, every place we needed it, that would probably keep more mule deer alive than anything else we could do, besides maybe habitat management. And so I just want to, I think we're going to continue this conversation. Mule deer are very important to Wyoming. I think everybody here appreciates all the work that we're doing. It's really hard to get actionable items out of some of these things, but I think we're open to those kind of suggestions from the department and from the folks on the ground that say, this makes sense, or this makes sense. Let's try it. Let's use a carrot approach instead of a stick in this area and see what happens. I think we're open to doing anything we can to try to keep more mule deer on the ground and make more babies. And so I think I guess my last thing would just let us know. I mean, let us know what you guys think we should do. And I think that's what I take from this, because not every area is the same. And certainly what people are talking about on the western side of the state is different than on the eastern side of the state. And so, it might happen region by region, which is probably how it will, but I think we're just open to all kinds of suggestions that we can help with.
Yeah, President Lundvall, Commissioner Bell, thanks for the comments, and we'll certainly take that under advisement. I think what you just said encapsulates the reason why we need to turn some of our efforts more internally as well. Now, any one of us that's been managing mule deer or has a statewide perspective kind of generally knows what, we have a pretty good feel for what the issues are around the state, the bigger picture issues, but driving down into those region-specific issues is valuable. And for example, like the highway crossing project, we put a ton of work into that and identified crossing structure priorities around the state. But those are the kind of things that we need to continue to look at. And we're learning more and more all the time, whether it's through putting callers out or just continuing to engage with YDOT and better understanding collision hotspots, that sort of thing. So that's a reason why we need to engage in this internal effort as well.
Madam President, if I might, thank you for that great presentation. So I kind of got out of it that it's the trivial death by 1,000 cuts, but the public doesn't want to go to the doctor. And but I think that looking at this, and it's just been kind of driving me nuts, of course, but you know, you look at the antler point restrictions, check, predator check, chronic weight check, harvest check, everything's checked. It's kind of on the board, and there's just different areas that it deals with. But I think that what kind of abundantly comes clear is that I think that we can do, I think we need to be, the department needs to be a really aggressive in migration corridors. And that will go a long ways with the habitat. So, and the other commissioners spoke a little bit about it. And it's, I think that with the crossings, the corridors, the migration, everything, I think, and little luck from Mother Nature, that I think we can try to climb out of this a little bit. But I think the department does wonderful work addressing all of these little things. As you know, the staff does everything they can to be in tune with the public and to get the opportunities up there and to try to help our numbers come up on these deer. And like you said, it's a problem with all of the states. We're not the only ones. Every single state is dealing with this. But I think that if we could, I think we could do our part as a big push for migration corridors and to allow these animals that natural flow, what they need to, they need to deserve. Okay, thanks.
Commissioner or President Lenval, I noticed Commissioner Masterson's mic has been red for a while.
Madam Chair, thank you. There are two things I really, really don't want to say. First of all, Mr. Benfit, very nicely done. I appreciate the work and very well done presentation. I really don't want to say that, but I will. The thing you handed out, the hard copy, can you make sure that that gets forwarded to Ms. Bell so it can be put as part of our record? We can do a 17A. The second thing I really hate to say is that I agree with Commissioner Bell on the surveys. I hate the idea of making, somebody fill out a form. I really don't like that idea. But it strikes me intuitively. I mean, you do this all the time, but just intuitively, it strikes me that we're in a situation where the more data we get, the better we are going to be. And I hate the idea of making it mandatory. I'm aware other states make it mandatory with some pretty draconian penalties, some could say, if you don't do it. But my experience with voluntary surveys is that the only people who fill them out are people who are mad or people who are so happy they want to share their story. And that there's a whole chunk of people who just don't do it for various reasons. So I just wanted to add my 2 cents that I think, again, intuitively, it strikes me that it would be helpful. Because data is what drives all this. So I wanted to just add that for whatever it might be worth. I just think it just seems to be logical to me. So thank you for the good work. And gosh, I guess there's a third thing I hate to say. Commissioner Roberts' comment, I agree with. I think I would encourage the department to be as aggressive as possible in getting the word out about all of this stuff you're doing and all of the efforts you're undertaking. Because I don't think the public as a whole is aware. They're aware that you know that there's a problem, but do they know all this stuff that you know and all these things that you're doing? I'm not quite sure. And I'm not trying to add to your workload. I just think that at every available opportunity communicating that, he said, looking at Nish, to communicate all of these efforts, I think would be really helpful. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions?
Madam President?
Yes, Commissioner Haskell.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Benfit. This is, like everyone else has said, really good information. I'm a little disappointed in the public for not being a little more engaged. Looking at some quick numbers here, 37 meetings, only 486 attendees. That's an average of 13 per meeting and only 52 comments. So to go with what Commissioner Masterson was saying, very few people contribute to that data, and data is very valuable. With that, what are your sources? What are the department sources for the harvest surveys?
President Linville, Commissioner Haskell, I guess I'm not quite sure I'm following you.
So are your data on the department's data on the harvest surveys, is that only the questionnaires that are sent out, postseason? And I think University of Wyoming compiles all of that?
Yeah, Commissioner Haskell, that's correct. So, well, there's two things. Throughout the course of a hunting season, our biologists and wardens are out checking hunters. When we actually field check an animal, we capture all that information. So, sex, age, if we're pulling teeth, a chronic wasting disease sample, antler spread, if it's, for bucks, that sort of thing. So we collect that information during the hunting season, but then we don't use that field check information to estimate total harvest. We do that exclusively through those surveys.
Okay. And I'm too want to echo Commissioner Masterson's sentiment on not making it mandatory. I'm not a fan of that myself, but I've noticed I've engaged with field officers in collecting that data, and it seems like, on their phone, they have an app, they can take a picture of the barcode on the back of that and enter that information. Something like that being available to the public to upload some of that information, that harvest information may be helpful in that. I don't know if that, I'm sure there's a lot of smart people here, and I'm sure that conversation and that topic's already come up, but that's an idea that could be shared. And the reason for my initial question is, does the department work with, say, the Wyoming State Board of Outfitters and Professional Guides? Because as licensed outfitters, and I'm pointing to Lee Livingston, fellow outfitter in here, we are required to turn that information in at the end of the year. And we have harvest survey right there that's available for use.
Yeah, President Linville, Commissioner Haskell. So a couple things there. The extent to which our regions are actually getting that from WIOA affiliates, I couldn't speak to. Most of my history has been in the Casper region, where outfitting was a lot less prominent well, I shouldn't say that. It's a much more of a combination of outfitting and trespass fees. So the issue you would run into with that, any more information is good information, right? So I wouldn't suggest we refrain from that, but we would have to be really careful with how we incorporate that into a harvest estimate, because outfitted hunts typically experience much higher harvest success and could therefore actually unduly bias the estimate that gets produced from that. So we need to rely, at least within the current framework where we're at, is relying on a much more randomized survey. And you had an earlier question, and now I'm forgetting that I was going to address.
Regarding when field officials are conducting that, harvest stuff, was that it when they?
No, it was past that. I'm sorry.
I forgot too. Well, with that, I do have a few other remarks or questions in regard to habitat health. has there been any studies conducted regarding, we know that cheatgrass is a problem in the state of Wyoming and certainly more prominent in other parts than some, but also, we're seeing an increase in, noxious weeds and using broadleaf herbicides and other chemicals to control those. Do you find that affects, reproductive rates of mule deer or other ungulates?
So President Lundvall, Commissioner Haskell, that's another really tough nut to crack. I mean, we do know for a fact when we're, say, in the case of removing invasive annual grasses, we can measure resulting vegetative responses, whether it's more production of tall forb communities, herbaceous communities like grasses and sedges and forbs and things like that, and nutritional health of mixed mountain shrubs, whether that be sagebrush or mahogany or sumac or whatever. So that we can look at, and we do have a fairly good understanding. We don't do that. We certainly don't do that in the vast majority of projects we implement because a lot of that's fairly settled science. We know it's a good thing for the landscape, for rangeland health and the water profile, and the soil profile. So with now to equate that to actual like increased fawn production and or fawn survival recruitment into the population, that's a much tougher ask. And there's so many other variables that can factor into that I don't think we'd probably ever really get there unless it was just a really sweeping wholesale landscape change. Now, having said that, we do and have the opportunity, and a lot of it is through like the focal herd program that you guys heard about this morning. If you rewind the clock to last fall, there was some very substantial fires in the Sheridan region. We had a lot of collared deer use in that area. We had collared deer actually while the fire was still burning in little pockets of unburned stuff. So there's going to be a real neat opportunity to understand landscape utilization, potentially even fawn survival with those does that are occupying that burned area versus unburned. I mean, that potential is there. A similar phenomenon happened during the Mullen Fire down in the Snowy Range. So there's things that can that can be looked at.
Well, again, thank you for all of this information and all of the hard work that you guys do.
Thank you.
Madam President, I have one more question. Justin, do you think, and does it ever come up when we're having this discussion? Because we do typically hear from some folks about more limited quota areas. We also hear that people don't want it to change, but I think from those folks that want more limited quota areas, especially for mule deer, do you think they understand, or do we have that conversation with them about how many of those licenses will probably go to landowners?
President Lundvall, Commissioner Bell, you're talking something near and dear to my heart. It's certainly something that when I talked about those statewide mule deer initiatives, and then when we launched into region-wide mule deer initiatives, and I was the Casper Wildlife Coordinator at the time, and we talked through that. And I guess I got a twofold answer to your question. First of all, it is our experience, not just in Casper, but statewide, when we take the time, and more importantly, the public takes the time to really invest with our personnel to really dive deep into these issues and the data and understand how limited quota populations perform compared to general license hunted populations. Folks get that and they do understand that difference, but you can't go all through that in a 2-hour meeting in the evening. So we do get that. And what was the second part of your question?
Just how many of those licenses in the limited quota area
Yeah,
could potentially go to landowners, as they would qualify with. Anyway, just.
And so like, for example, using my Casper region example, when we went through that mule deer initiative, and there was initially a lot of support to convert area 66, which is south of Casper, and Casper is the biggest hunting community in the state of Wyoming, as far as number of hunters go, and a lot of public land and that sort of thing. And so there's long been interest in that. And when you talk through, at the time, we did an analysis of just how many of those licenses would go to landowners at the time. And it was pretty overwhelming. And to an individual, everyone that engaged in that MDI basically indicated like they had no idea or something they had never thought of. So it's certainly a very important consideration that needs to be made every time.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Madam President, one more follow-up to that. On the harvest reporting, and I don't want to tip anybody over, but we do, AIS, we do have a lot of stations. Everywhere has a for the boats. Is there any thought to incorporate this harvest reporting to these stations where I kind of envision where they'd pull up with a form and they'd hand them a clipboard and ask a few questions? Because I mean, we spend a lot of money on those places, so I'm wondering if we could, or their workloads or whatever, would it be possible to hand them say, hunters, you need to have this harvest reporting, and you just pull in a AIS station and they give them a clipboard and go from there?
So President Lundvall, Commissioner Roberts, you actually prompted my memory to Commissioner Haskell's, one of his original questions I was going to answer, which segues into what you just asked. And that is, Commissioner Haskell had asked about ways to report harvest through the phone. And is what I meant to say is we had formed a committee a long time ago and we've actually just recently re-engaged talks with our IT folks to actually go down the road of, we're exploring the idea of developing an app. Some other state game and fish agencies already have that. It's a huge programming lift. In my opinion, and this is just me, it's probably somewhere where we need to go in the future. And with that, facilitating harvest survey reporting could be a huge component of that. So that's something that we are looking into. That's a big lift, and it's probably not something that can be done even within a year. So stay tuned on that. I don't know where we're going to go, given the financial commitment to that. Some of that's going to reside with Director Bruce and others. And I'm also getting the hint that maybe we're going long if cookies are getting passed out. I may need one, Commissioner Lundvall. But getting back to your question, Commissioner Roberts, as far as like handing out a flyer, the challenge with that certainly is something that could be really successfully done in some parts of the world. For example, in the Wyoming range, where Gary Freilich has a check station he's ran for 30 years and lots of folks drain out of the Grays River. You could absolutely do something like that. The challenges you get with a lot of other areas, there's so many points of entry and egress or private land hunting and that sort of thing. It would be really tough to have a centralized or even multiple places within a hunt area to hand those out. So I think it would be best for us to rely on email and internet technology for that.
I just wanted Alan to have to work more.
Any more questions with all of your mouths full of cookies? All right, we do have one public comment. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you.
Cliff LeBlanc.
Hello again. Commissioner Director Bruce, thank you for the opportunity to speak again today. I appreciate the chance to clarify my points from yesterday as I familiarize myself with this process. As you said, my name is Cliff LeBlanc. I value the Commission's work in maintaining Wyoming's rich hunting heritage and its commitment to ethical hunting practices. I come before you today to address a matter central to that heritage that we talked about yesterday, fair chase, and how advancements in technology and increased access to Wyoming's backcountry are challenging what constitutes a fair and ethical hunt. Wyoming's Title 23 provides strong regulatory guidance on ethical hunting. However, Title 23 does not explicitly define fair chase. As technology and modern conveniences continue to change the hunting landscape, we must ask, is it time to establish a more coherent definition of fair chase in Wyoming law? Hunting technology has evolved rapidly, offering hunters unprecedented advantages. While these tools increase efficiency, they also raise fair chase concerns. Consider these two examples. Long-range hunting. Modern rifles and optics allow shots exceeding 1,000 yards. At such distances, is the animal truly engaged in a fair chase scenario? Other states, such as Idaho, have begun restricting rifle weight and scope capabilities to maintain fair chase standards. Another example, GPS spotter coordination. Wyoming currently does not restrict use of multiple spotters using radios and GPS to guide a hunter to an animal's exact location. This practice arguably diminishes the personal skill and effort required for a true fair chase hunt. I'd submit that this activity is very similar to using drones, which are outlawed in Wyoming. Fair chase is not just about the tools we use. It's also about the effort required to engage in the hunt. Over the past several decades, technology and infrastructure have significantly reduced the challenges of reaching Wyoming's most remote hunting areas. Everyone should acknowledge that these modern luxuries that we now enjoy. The first one is improved road access. Paved highways and maintained backcountry roads have made previously isolated areas far more accessible to horse trailers, allowing more hunters to reach prime hunting grounds with minimal effort. Advanced vehicles and navigation, modern 4x4 trucks, ATVs, GPS mapping apps like OnX Hunt, and emergency satellite beacons ensure that few hunters ever face the risks or challenges of true backcountry hunting. Cold weather comforts, high-tech insulated clothing, sub-zero rated gear, and heated camp trailers have made extreme weather conditions far less of a deterrent than in past generations. While these improvements enhance safety, they are also raise a critical question. Should Wyoming's regulations evolve to ensure that ease of access does not reduce the integrity of the hunt? Wyoming has an opportunity to lead. I found great value in Chris McBarnes' comment from the Wildlife Fund yesterday. I heard him say, Wyoming is a leader in wildlife conservation. I want that to be true for hunting ethics and fair chase as well. I mentioned yesterday that other states have already taken steps to address these concerns. For instance, Idaho, that I mentioned earlier, limits rifle weight and proposed restrictions on rangefinder technology. Colorado bans smart rifles with electronic firing systems. And Arizona, Nevada, and Montana have all outlawed real-time trail cameras. Wyoming has an opportunity to act proactively before modern technology erodes the principles of fair chase. As such, I urge the commission to consider explicitly defining fair chase in Title 23 regulations to set clear ethical guidelines for Wyoming hunters, reevaluating the use of real-time technology and GPS coordinated spotter teams, assessing long-range shooting, including potential regulations on rifle weight, scope capabilities, and shot distances. And the last one, examining the impact of expanded access on wildlife pressure and the overall fairness of the hunt. Wyoming has long been a standard bearer for ethical hunting. These challenges will only grow in urgency, and Wyoming has the opportunity to act now, proactively and thoughtfully to uphold its legacy of ethical hunting. By defining fair chase and addressing the challenges posed by modern technology and increased accessibility, we can ensure that the hunt remains as much about skill, patience, and respect for wildlife it is about success. Most importantly, we can ensure that our children and grandchildren experience the same hunting traditions that we have cherished throughout our lifetimes. Let's ensure that Wyoming leads the way, not just in conservation, but in preserving the ethics of the hunt in future generations. Thank you.
Madam President.
Yes.
Yeah, Cliff, thank you. I appreciate that. During the task force, the Wyoming Wildlife Task Force, we did talk a little bit about some of these things and ethics and fair chase and I think a couple things that Wyoming has done, and we don't allow real-time camera to hunt with that. I mean, I think that's something that we don't, and drones. And I think that we have and continue to look at Title 23 and look at some of these things. It's the first time I have heard somebody, say that maybe we shouldn't use heaters or things like that. I mean, and cold weather gear, because technology certainly has changed. I can tell you, raising two boys, that it was easier to take them hunting when they were warm than it was when they were cold, and it led to them wanting to hunt more and fish more. And so I think there's some things that we have to have a happy medium, but I also think that when we try to regulate morals and ethics, that is difficult sometimes. And so I think you've been introduced to Dan. Maybe bringing some specific things would be helpful for that, instead of a very broad sweeping change everything. I think some specific things would help, because I think we hear all the time that maybe we shouldn't allow crossbows or we shouldn't allow this, and what we do when we do that is we also limit some things. We limit somebody's ability to be in the outdoors, and so we try to weigh all those things, and I think we'll continue to do that. But I appreciate those comments.
Any other questions or comments?
Madam President, thank you, Cliff, for coming again today and addressing the commission and for your concerns. They're certainly very valid. And it's interesting that when you have conversations with people, oftentimes the topic of ethics comes up, and I ask the question, what is the definition of ethical hunting? It's different for everyone, for a lot of different reasons. And then again, I ask the question, what is the definition of long-range shooting and hunting? And I get a lot of different answers. So it's, I think those things need to be discussed. But also I would submit that with the advances of technology, whether it be in firearms and optics or the clothing that we use, those advances have made us more efficient. And I would ask, doesn't that make us more ethical in being more efficient and proficient? Thank you.
All right, thank you for the discussion. We'll move on to agenda item number 18.
Good Law, Commissioners, Director Bruce. I'm Alan Osterlin, Chief of Fisheries. And this morning I'm going to provide you an update on the Spies cool and warm water facility. So this update is going to be a little bit more formal than we've had in the past, to get the two new commissioners, hopefully, some background information on the project. It's a big undertaking by the department. And then you might recall from our November meeting, I had mentioned that, a lot of the costs associated with these projects are coming over budget, whether it's in this state or other states. And we anticipated this one to do the same, that we'd have some 50% designs, which gives us a better number on the cost projections by February, which we have. So at the end of the presentation, I'll give you some updates on the 50% design. So. And then just one thing to hit on is that there's no commission action that we're going to be requesting. This is just an informational only presentation. So. So why are we doing this? So over the years, you know, Wyoming is a trout state primarily. We've transitioned to a lot of cool and warm water species in a lot of parts of the state. They've become really popular with anglers. And over the years, we've negotiated trades with other states in order to provide the approximately 1.5 million fish that we get annually. And those fish can come from lots of different places as far as Arkansas, Nebraska, North Dakota, Oklahoma, and then other species like green sunfish, muskie, largemouth bass, shovel-nosed sturgeon, white crappie. They come from different places as well as they're available. But annually, we get those species listed there. And we'll circle back around, but you can see that the walleye, we get about 900,000 walleye annually from the Garrison Federal Hatchery in North Dakota, which is right on the Missouri main stem. And that'll become important as we get through the presentation. So AIS is a major concern for us, prevention, keeping it out of the state, which the threat of AIS is coming closer and closer to the state every year. We've got a really robust AIS, aquatic invasive species program. It keeps on expanding. And so far, knock on wood, we've been successful in keeping a lot of the real bad actors out of the state. But as part of that, when we bring fish into the state, we do everything we can to make sure we don't have any hitchhikers coming in on those loads. And within the division, we're really creative in our naming of things. And you can see what they're doing here. We call them boarding because we pour the fish under a board and then wash it down and pick the fragments or fish or anything that is in there off. And we've got more sophisticated over the years. It's more of a pinball process so that you don't get any rush of water that might allow things to go through. And as it pins balls down through there, we pick out, might be plant fragments. It could be crustaceans like a crawdad, something like that magnum bullfrog down there. Could be tadpoles. Or it could be, clams. Like that one in the bottom left is a zebra mussel. And so zebra mussels, that's an adult right there. As you guys have heard during presentations, there's the veliger, which is a microscopic larval form of the mussel. And that's really concerning. We do have some, like pill clams and stuff we find all the time in these loads that we pick out. We've done, like I said, the boarding. We've also done eDNA here recently to make sure that there's no dry scented eDNA in those loads as we're bringing them into the state. And if there were, we'd destroy the load or send them back. But where that becomes important is dry scented mussels are the biggest threat we feel to our aquatic ecosystems. So with the mussels moving up the Missouri main stem, they were discovered in Lake Wahi last year in South Dakota, which is in the central part of the state. Keeps on ticking up further to the north. Garrison Hatchery is on a reservoir in North Dakota, which is about 200 air miles from there. So last year when we were scheduled to get those fish from Garrison, we had to really analyze the risk, whether it was worth it. And we knew this had been coming. So about 5-6 years ago.
Madam Chair, just real quick, can you go back a slide?
Sure.
What the heck is that on the right?
We're not sure, but it looks really scary. No, it's
Fair enough.
It might be bullfrog tadpoles or some kind of tadpole. So we started down the walleye trials, knowing that this is coming down the road. Can we grow our own fish? can we get out of this importation process where we have this risk? We have really stringent regulations that we require private fish hatcheries from out of state for what they have to operate under importation wise. And from my perspective, if we, through our process of bringing in these importations, were to import something bad, it would be really bad. So that's why we started going down this road of producing our own fish. And it was important for us to figure out, can we do this? So we looked at all of our 10 hatchery water sources, temperatures, water quality, or do we create a standalone hatchery? And the conclusion that we came up with is that we have the footprint, we have the water quality at Spies. The other place that we do have the potential for water quality might be Tillet, but we don't own that property. We own this. We lease Tillet from a private individual. A standalone hatchery would probably be double the price tag of this or more. So we landed at Spies, and this is where we tried to put the trials together. And as with anything, those culture section guys put their head to, they were successful. Growing walleye and other warm water species as well. So from that point, we hired McMillan and Jacobs, an engineering firm, to conduct this feasibility study. So we knew we could grow the fish, but does that facility, the infrastructure there at Spies, would it be adequate to grow the species that we need? So they had a look at, this is a busy slide, but number 3, you can see the bioprogramming, what species we're trying to grow. Hydraulics, they looked at everything and they came up with a bottom line number. Their cost estimate was $17,738,688 was what they projected for everything. So from there, we went to the commission in September of 2023 and asked for approval to dedicate some money for the hatchery and move forward. The commission approved 17.7 million for the facility. That would be 15.2 for construction. And then directed the department to proceed with engineering, the first step of the project, for 2.5 million, and that would cover construction oversight as well. So back in February 2024, the engineering design process began. During the bid process, McMillan again was chosen as the engineering firm, and they've been doing a great job so far for us. So we're currently probably at greater than 50% design now, but 50% design was is where everything's kind of pulled tight. And we went through some sit-down meetings, some site visits. Our engineering and culture folks have been meeting with McMillan sometimes twice a week over the process, getting up to 50% design. They've narrowed the scope of the project, tried to do a lot of cost reductions, and that continues till today. Engineering would have been completed in May, but it's pushed back to June probably, since we've asked the engineering firm to do a lot of modifications to reduce that cost. So it'll be more in June, and then in July, we'll be able to come back to the commission with 100% design cost estimate of the project. If the project proceeds forward, groundbreaking would begin in the spring of 2026. And bid will be put out in fall of 2025, groundbreaking spring of 2026, and potential project completion spring of 2028. That is the outside projection to account for any equipment delays. So this is an architect's rendition of the building itself. It won't be near like that shiny bottom one below. It'll be more conservative earth tones on the exterior. And the engineering and the culture guys have taken a real minimalistic approach to the project. What's important to them is not the fixtures inside, but the plumbing, the tanks, what's required to grow fish. So this is schematic of the facility. For those of you who've been down there, we come in from the left, and then you would take that middle road and down towards that blue building, and you can see the project building design right there. The building right to the left of it is the office, that small white one. And the blue buildings are the trout production facilities. And then the hatchery building is actually up on the hill to the south. Here's a schematic of the interior of that building. And you know, Wyoming is a high elevation state, cold water. That's what makes it great for growing trout, not so great for growing cool, warm water species. So a lot of the species like walleye that are grown in other states may be in earthen ponds. We don't have the ability to do that. So everything's got to be inside in tanks, which makes it more costly, more labor intensive, but it gives us the ability to control the environment completely and produce a really good product. So that's why you're seeing all the tanks in here. Everything's going to be internal, recirculating or partial recirculating systems. There would be brood stock potentials for just about any species, warm, cool water that we had listed there. And then there will be some office space for personnel too.
Alan, do you have a rough size estimate on width and length on that? I can't see the tiny little.
President Lundvall, 400. 400 feet.
Building's a little over 200 feet long and 100 feet wide.
2 by 1.
Little 2 by 100.
Okay, thank you.
It's roughly the same size for those that you've been there as a hatchery building at the facility right now. So benefits of having our own facility, we can produce the species numbers recommended by our fisheries management supervisor, become 100% self-reliant, producing stock fish at the optimal water conditions at specific times of the year, instead of having to stock fish when they're available. When another state calls and said, your fish are ready, we go get them. And might not be the optimal time for survival, plant those fish here at this latitude. Minimize transport time and stress of fish in the truck prior to stocking. We wouldn't have to board anymore. It'd be a short trip, not coming from Arkansas. Eliminate potential bringing in invasive AIS or fish pathogen, protect our state resources. Like I mentioned, that I'm estimating that we're going to be out of the import business on a lot of these species here shortly to protect the state and provide the resource for the next generation of anglers. I like to look at this project as a generational project. You know, it's walleye fishing in these cool, warm water species becoming more popular in the state. And as some waters change, you know, we might be stocking more of these cool, warm water species in these waters that are typically we've been doing trout species. So this isn't just a quick fix, but it's providing the resource for the next generations. And we'll jump into everything you've been waiting for. So here's 50% design costs. And as you can see, as that's projected, it's quite a bit over. There are some things that we're continuing to do, which like one part of it that is going to save a lot of money is us cutting out the middleman, buying some of the equipment like the tanks, drum filters, big cost items that we can purchase on our own and eliminate that middleman. We can save a lot of money that way. If you go to the bottom there where it says design, permitting, construction assistance, might remember we have 2.5 million already designated for that. We'll spend 1.4 for the engineering or thereof, and the construction oversight will vary. It's more than the original 2.5 because the scope of the project, when they're going into it, they're estimating. That number could be less than that. All these other numbers could be less than that too. But total cost 25,836 less the 2.5 million is what we'd be looking at approximately. And with that, I'll take any questions. If I can't answer it, I have backup.
Madam President, I've got 3 questions if I might. The facility's gonna go right on top of where the raceways are there, the old raceways, is that right? Okay.
President Lundvall, Commissioner Roberts, that's correct. Thank you for bringing it up. It'll be right where the old footprint of the raceways were. When we went through the renovation at Spees, put everything inside, those raceways weren't being used very much. So that was another reason when we decided to go with Spees. We had the footprint right there, all the infrastructure is right there, which would make the costs less.
And also that when I was there, how did the walleye go that we were raising the test sample, the walleye go? And then also, I still haven't seen where that smallmouth bass is made it on your list anywhere, but I was just checking.
President Lundvall, Commissioner Roberts. So smallmouth bass certainly could be added to the future, but they're not on the schedule now. And as far as how the trials have gone, excellent. We're producing, and Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, but about 150,000. We're maxed out at about 150,000 fingerlings and about 100,000 swim up fry annually that we're sticking into various waters around state. 125,000 fingerlings.
My turn. Thank you, Madam Chair. Alan, thank you. And I understand you're the messenger and you don't get to bring a particularly joyous message. So know that. You said the new project cost 25.83. Did you say minus something as well?
Yeah,
I missed what you said.
Madam President, Commissioner Masterson. So the 50% design project cost is 25,836. And I'm going to jump back here for a few slides. You guys had committed 17.7 million.
Right.
And 2.5 million was for engineering and construction oversight.
2.3, right.
So it comes out about, 2.4. So that figure of the total cost estimate for the 50% design will be less.
Oh, because you've already spent it.
We're going to have 1.4 spent for the engineering by June, approximately. And then that extra million will be sitting there. It's already out there with that 15 million that you guys already authorized for the project.
Okay.
If you follow me.
I think so. you don't, me personally, you don't have to sell me on the advantages of having this. The big one to me being AIS, because I think that's a statewide threat. I don't think the average person or the average city council or county commission understands the consequences should they get here. To me, that's huge, but so you don't have to sell me on the merits. I'm really disturbed that again, you're the messenger, and I'm sure you're disturbed by it as well, but we're like 40%, 50% more in terms of cost. So that it's going to take me a little bit to get my head around it. I know you're doing an informational presentation, so this might be a question for the director. When will the moment come when we will be asked whether or not we want to commit to the rest of this?
Madam President, I will try to talk. Sorry, I don't have much of a voice. Commissioner Masterson, July.
July.
Commission meeting.
I don't have anything else going on in July, so why not bring this up? If we came to you and said, look, 20 million is all we got. That's it. Do the best you can. What would you drop? Or is this an all or nothing kind of thing?
President Ledwell, Commissioner Masterson, and that's a great question. And we went into this project with not necessarily the all or nothing, but what do we need to provide this opportunity at the level they are right now? And that's what you're seeing right now. For me, if we could cut out some species that we wouldn't produce, but it wouldn't make any sense to still import them. You still have that risk. But we could not produce certain species, or we could produce less of them. And you just wouldn't have the numbers you have now going into the water. There would be some opportunity, yes. I can't speak of, like if you were to say, you got 15 million for construction and do with it what you can. I'm not sure what that would mean engineering wise, if they'd have to go back to square one, or if they could whittle it down to a point where we can massage that. I'm a glass half full guy, and I'm really hoping that after all the dust settles, we might be around that, what you're saying, and that would be awesome.
Yeah.
But our guys are really exceptional on making things work when they can. And they've been trying to do that right now. And if it came down to that point, yeah, we'd look at, okay, this is what we got to do. And
I think you could get rid of the smallmouth bass. I think you just cut them. And then you can have Eric go through the budget because he's really good at finding things. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Any other questions?
I have a comment. It kind of relates to your comments, Commissioner Masterson. Because of the threat that AIS proposes, we don't have a choice but to do this. And you made the comment that people don't understand what the problem would be if AIS got here. AIS is a huge problem if it comes here. The problem for me right now is Game and Fish is the only one that's keeping it out, where it's everybody's problem. We have to do this project to lessen that chance, because every time we get a load of fish here, there's that chance, and we don't want that. So whatever it costs, we just got to figure it out, as far as I'm concerned.
Madam Chairman, thank you for this information. How many fisheries will this service with these hatchlings and stocking the fish?
Dave, you got a swag on how many. I mean, there's a lot of hatcheries or fisheries around the state that we stock walleye in. Some of them are self-sustaining like Glendo, but like in your neck of the woods, Keyhole would get, it gets a lot of walleye from Garrison. Sometimes it could get some crappie. Catfish that we're bringing in go to a lot of these community ponds around the state, like in Cheyenne, the lakes we have there. The bluegill that we've been bringing in go to a lot of community ponds around the state. The tiger muskie go in, just about every region of the state is getting some of these fish in some way, shape, and form. And I put that picture of that boy with the crappie in there because that's one of the things that these fish will be supplementing or creating are these community fisheries, which is really important to me because these kids are our future. And right now we're stocking a lot of these waters with bluegill, and that kids can catch readily, green sunfish, trout as well where we can. But some communities don't have that type water. Anything to add, Dave?
No, I think you covered most of it.
So, but every region in the state has some, like if you were to look here, Deaver up in, we put walleye in. Some of the lakes over by Grable, walleye go in there. Crappie right here in Beck Lake and Cody. So it's all through the state. They're getting a lot of these fish.
That's good. Well, it's good to know that this hatchery will benefit not just certain portions of the state, but the entire state and all of that. And I guess just a comment maybe for marketing effects that we can say now that we don't have to waterboard our fish anymore, right? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, last agenda item of the day before we have our call to the public.
Yeah. Thank you. Good morning, President Lundvall, members of the commission, Director Bruce. I'm Mark Nelson, the planning chief with the director's office. And we'll be looking at some policies to revise or even eliminate today. We're going to ask you to take some action. So a little bit of background. Many of our policies haven't been addressed or looked at in 20, 25 years. They're pretty old, and we took a hard look at all of our policies, and each division will be presenting their revisions to the commission later on. But some of these policies that we looked at, some are better suited just to have the department have the flexibility to change the policies without going before the commission for every change. Some of the policies are better utilized just as more of a procedures document that would be removed from a policy and let the department have their internal guidelines for employees. And some are even contrary to how we do business today. For instance, we'll be looking at one later on. Your policy says that the department shall not submit any advertisements in our mailings or brochures. Our fishing regulation pamphlet has a lot of advertisements in it to help defray costs. So we're actually acting against policy, so we're going to change that. Like I said, what we'll do is present at each commission meeting policy changes, except this next commission meeting in April for season setting. So with that, I know your commission packet included these 5 policies that we're going to ask you to take action on, had comments with them. I'll just briefly go over some of the highlights. So policy 1A, commission business. A lot of this language is really unnecessary. It's the normal course of action that we take in our day-to-day business. So some of that has been eliminated. The bottom red strike through there, the statute actually 28.1.115C directs the department to submit a report to the governor, not the commission. So that can be removed, and those annual reports are actually posted on our website. And when we submit those to the governor, when we get back the approved ones, we can certainly mail it to the commission. The general guidance one, we're recommending just to eliminate that whole policy. All these statements are really self-evident. It's how we conduct our business, and it's fairly redundant. We don't believe that we need the commission to direct us to example their number 6. You direct us to coordinate among divisions in our when we operate things. That's what we do normally day to day. Policy 2C. This just updates language to align it with the deputy directors. There's an internal and external deputy director, so we address that. We also incorporate where human resources is involved in this policy. And the last language there deleted was just redundant. We addressed it above. This same policy, the page 2, the statute actually directs the commission or the department to take action. It doesn't address the commission to do anything. For instance, the chief game warden, this policy says the commission endorses the chief game warden to issue citation books, where the statute itself directs the chief game warden. So really unneeded for you guys to endorse what we already do. With the travel policy, you can see there's a lot of strike throughs. We are asking to keep this policy, but this is one, much like the uniform policy a year or two ago, you changed the policy to let the department change things with uniforms as they came up. We didn't have to keep going back to you, and we changed minor things, not shirt colors or anything like that. Same with travel and lodging. Right now, often we get changes to per diem rates, things like that. Instead of going before you with each minor change, we would ask that you give us the flexibility. It's still policy, but when changes come up before, let's say lodging rates change, we'll just change those internally. The language that allows it, allows us to do that would be, let me see here if I get this right. So the Wyoming Game and Fish Commission grants the director of the department the authority to establish procedures, could be for travel, could be for the reimbursement. So when they change, we just change it. You allow us to do that. The last policy for elimination, smoking policy, there's no direct charge to you by the legislature to do anything with a smoking policy. We do follow state policy as far as smoking goes. It's a statewide policy, for example, in a vehicle policy. So that could be eliminated. And we'd manage that just through our internal direction to our employees. So with that, I'd be happy to answer questions, but we would recommend that the commission vote to approve revisions or eliminations of the policies as presented.
Commissioner Masterson.
All right. On page 1A, line 6, I noticed, no, I'm just kidding. I really appreciate the work that you've put into this, because this is tedious and time consuming. And so thank you for cleaning this up. I'm with you. And I know there are other, well, maybe there aren't other comments, but I would move the commission vote to approve the revisions and eliminations of the policies as presented.
Second.
Any questions, debate, or discussion? All in the favor of the motion? Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right. there
Thank
go.
you.
Thank you. All right, we have 3 public comments so far. Dave Sweet, come on up.
That one. Sorry. I'll start over. President Lundvall, Commissioners, and Director Bruce. My name is David Sweet. I'm a Trout Unlimited member from here in Cody. I happen to be the Conservation Chair for the East Yellowstone chapter here in Cody. I've also taken on a number of roles with the Wyoming Council of Trout Unlimited. Just by way of background, we represent about 12 chapters around the state of Wyoming, 1,700 members. We're a cold water conservation group, primarily focused on trout. Alan will be glad to know. However, we have a deep interest in the Spies hatchery. We endorse what Alan has proposed. And it is primarily because of the threat of invasive species, as you have all noted. But I would like to add that there's the unknown out there that scares us the most. We all know about quagga mussels, zebra mussels, certain pathogens and diseases. But 10 years ago, we didn't know about some of those. We worry about what's to come in the future through AIS. So we support the Game and Fish Department plans to expand the Spies hatchery. I would also like to take the opportunity to thank the commissioners for their support of Trout Unlimited over the years, in particular, the 3 commissioners' big game licenses granted to our organizations. But I would also like to thank you for the cooperation on a number of our projects. In particular, I point out the Trout in the Classroom program, which has been a huge success in this state. And we look forward to cooperating with you again and repetitively on that program. In addition, we have a number of kids fishing days events here in Cody. President Lundvall attended our activity here in Cody last year, is going to do so again this year. We appreciate that support. We also cooperate on a number of conservation efforts across the state. I'll just point out one here in the Cody region, and that's up on the Lakeview Irrigation District, where the Game and Fish has taken the lead and putting in a fish screen to prevent the trout from being entrained in that system. We're a partner on that. We very much appreciate the activities in those conservation projects. And I will conclude with that.
Any questions or comments for Mr. Sweet?
Madam Chair, a comment. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the endorsement of Spies. And you can make your $8 million check out to thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Masterson, President Lundvall. If we had $8 million, we would do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Becky Barber? Is this one online? No? Bill Robertson? Just kidding. All right. Becky.
Hi, can you hear me?
Can you hear us okay, Miss Barber?
Yes, can you hear me?
You may need to unmute.
I did. Let me. Can you hear me?
Are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Can we tell if she's muted? Can you tell if she's muted, gentlemen? Okay. All right, we'll move on to the next one while we hopefully work on that then. Mr. Robertson? You are welcome as well.
My name is Vicki Davis, and I'm here with a group called Bighorn County for Economic Development. About 4 or 5 years ago, this outfit, BSET as we call it, was just starting, and we needed funds to be able to do what we had set our minds to. And we went to Gaylan Bird, who was commissioner at the time, and she's a longtime family friend. The Alaman family brought my husband and I to this part of the world. But she said, well, let's try doing a permit, and we were granted an elk permit. With that elk permit, we raised $20,000. And with that $20,000, it gave us the opportunity to do the different programs. I'm going to tell you about 2 quickly today. The first one is called Without a Trace. And this is a program that we've done through the University of Wyoming 4-H group. They're in Basin. We have an extension office there. We started out, it was to train and teach children about the outdoors, because so many of these kids now are city kids, even though we live where, we have all these wonderful opportunities. So we worked on that, and the first year, we had about 15 or 20 kids, and the second year it got a little bit better. This year, I'm proud to announce we had 5 schools: Rocky Mountain, Lovell, Grable, Basin, and Burlington, with 160 kids. And this was, they had a ball. And we have for you down the road little keychains, and on it says Without a Trace, and it has a Sasquatch walking through the mountains, which they all relate to. But on the back, it has things to do and not to do, just short little deals to remind these kids. And I was so glad, because as they were leaving, every one of those little keychains was on their backpack. And so I know that they'll see those. The other program that we're involved in is Medicine Lodge. And that's the outdoor day, and that involves the entire state of Wyoming. That program, if you ever have a chance to be able to go and witness it, is incredible. So I'm going to turn over to Bill now.
Thank you, Vicki. Commissioner Lundvall, Vice President Jolovich, members of the commission, and Angie Bruce, Director Bruce, so there she is. My name is Bill Robertson. I am a retired game warden for the state of Wyoming, 35 years. Last 23 of those were in Grable area. But before that, I worked almost in every other corner of the state. Vicki and I are charter members of this group, this Bighorn County Citizens for Economic Development. And it was formed in 2019 by a number of individuals, men and women over there in Bighorn County. And our mission is to encourage the development of county and municipal leaders and private enterprises to ensure current and future generations to live and enjoy the high quality of life that we have in Bighorn County. With that in mind, one of our members, Nolan O'Neill from Shell, began a multi-agency effort to create this Bighorn County handbook that was passed out to you earlier. The sole purpose of our effort was to encourage the habit of learning from our neighbors, the many seasoned professionals of our areas who have worked in our area, to work together to be skillful stewards of the truly special place that we get to live in. So the guide kind of speaks for itself, and I encourage you to take this copy with you as you go home today. Hopefully, it conveys this idea of watershed concept of conservation that our group has promoted. And I think about the watershed concept when I was employed many years ago. And it is a pleasure to be in front of the commission as a citizen, not an employee. But the idea of watershed management, watershed concept of conservation is very important to us and the department as well. And as Vicki has mentioned, I want to thank those who were involved in putting this together. First and foremost, Nolan O'Neill. Also, the local game and fish personnel contributed to the wildlife section that you see here. And lastly, Commissioner Byrd, past Commissioner Galen Byrd, for her trust in our little group to direct our agency with a multidisciplinary approach to conservation that we wanted to follow. As Vicki mentioned, we were able to get quite a bit from the commissioner licenses. Actually, it's 24,000, but our group leveraged that to over $100,000, which is pretty exciting. And that's why we're able to fund many other outdoor education programs, and also then to pay for this book that you see here. Our goal, and it's being achieved right now, is that every household in Bighorn County got a copy of this insert that you got. And so there's a QR link on this that if you wanted a free copy, you can get a free copy. If you want a hard copy, you just bring this card into various vendors around the county that have supported our efforts, and every household can get a copy of this free of charge. So we're able to use that money from the commission to develop this beautiful notebook and handbook. And again, our goal then is to reach everyone in our area to help them see the importance of working together to achieve a common goal that we have, to be shared stewards of our natural resources, and to safely enjoy our shared natural resources that we have in Bighorn County. So thank Commissioner Byrd. She's not here, but thank you, commissioners, when you consider your commissioner licenses. I know a lot of times they go to places like Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, Trout Unlimited, we just heard, but sometimes the small groups can have significant impact as well. And I believe our group accomplished that. So with that, I don't want to take your time, but Vicki and I will be glad to stand for questions. President Lundvall.
Any questions? Thank you very much. This is beautifully done.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate the copy. Thank you for what you're doing.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Let's try Miss Barber again. Okay.
See if she can talk now. She needs to unmute herself.
Miss Barber, if you'll unmute yourself, we'll try again.
She's not coming through my phone either.
You said she's not coming to the phone either. I'm definitely coming through.
Madam President, I got a text that says, "Good morning. I can't call in if needed."
Oh, she can't call in? Are you getting anything from her about being over the Zoom link?
I'm getting a couple.
Okay.
And there's one, I'm getting more. Yeah, I can hear Becky on Zoom was one of the texts I got. And
So she can hear us, but we can't hear her.
just says I can hear Becky on Zoom.
You're receiving the text from Becky?
No,
Oh. it's from someone else.
it's Lisa, I think.
Oh,
And
okay.
and then she also said super.
Okay.
Or is it called? No, I got a new one.
Technology.
Can I call in if needed? She says. That's Becky. Becky,
Do you have her on?
This is the Zoom meeting. She is not here, so I don't.
if
Okay,
But they said that they heard it before, but I don't hear her now.
okay.
um
Can we try calling her? We've got her number here.
We have her number.
says Becky can call in. Let me see if Becky's number. Becky.
We've got her number.
is 1-307.
We've got it down here, Ken.
Oh, sorry.
I'll see if I can do speaker and do.
Yep.
Excuse me?
You on speakerphone and then have you go through the meeting? Okay, hold on. Okay, go ahead, Becky. We'll see if this worked.
Thank you, Madam President, Director Bruce, and commission members for the opportunity to speak. Of course, you know, SF 139 and 140 failed to pass through legislature. And after I was asked if Jester's legacy was done, we are not. I stand by my promise to Jester that his death will not be in vain. We continue to work with Senator Dockstader and Representative Erickson and others in hopes of getting these two bills picked up as interim topics for the 2026 legislative session. I do think there's some confusion. A lot of people seem to think that the bill regarding setbacks would instantly implement those setbacks. And I would say to those out there, you know, read the bill. It does not. It just merely allows the commission to promulgate rules and regulations establishing specifications for, and this is the added language, setbacks on public or state lands. Of course, you know, when that bill passes, the Game and Fish Commission, of course, would have to, and the Game and Fish Department would have to follow the Administrative Procedures Act and do their public meetings, get with stakeholders, and you know, get input and stuff. I also am aware that some people were saying that the setbacks would be on every road and every trail, which is, of course, not even feasible or possible. We have always mentioned, you know, we would look at numbered roads and numbered trails, and those roads being whether they were opened or closed. So I just wanted to let people know that, you know, we're not going anywhere. This is a promise I made to Jester, and you know, I've got time. So I just wanted to update everyone and thank everyone for their support. You know, we nudged a little further, and at one point we will get across the finish line. So thank you for your time and congratulations, Madam President, and welcome, Commissioner Haskell.
Thank you, Becky. Any comments or questions for Becky? All right, thank you so much.
Thanks, Becky.
All right, that's the last one that I have for public comment. And we're missing anyone online or anything? No one else? All right, if there's nothing else before the commission, I would see if anyone would like to adjourn. Oh, now you're silent.
Congratulations, Madam President. And congratulations to Mr. Jolovich for the second term of his esteemed vice presidency. And thanks, John.
So would you? still
Madam
like-
President,
Would
I'll-
someone
I'll-
still like
I'll
to
move to
adjourn?
adjourn.
You.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. Safe travels home. This meeting is adjourned.